051. Damn rubbish. It took so long to catch a woman? Let's replace this rubbish this time, Ibnad said coldly while riding on a tall man. Are you talking about this rubbish? Suddenly, a voice came from the air and said lightly, Huh. Ibnad raised his head and looked at the air with a little doubt. The next moment, a head fell from the sky and rolled on the ground. It was sent to capture Captain Manel. Following closely, a figure fell from the sky. Zoan put his hands in his pockets and looked at the ugly man in front of him. In addition to the thing that seemed to be a fish tank, he sneered and flashed a trace of coldness in his eyes. Oh. Seeing Zoan, Ibnad suddenly laughed and said excitedly, You are the lowly human called Zoan who ate the op fruit? I didn't expect you to appear here. It's really great. Lowly? Zoan raised his eyebrows and asked back as if he didn't hear clearly. Something's going to happen. Monet followed behind him, holding Sandang, and couldn't help shivering, thinking anxiously in his heart. Monet knew Zoan's character very well, and of course he didn't suggest Zoan to kill the celestial dragons, but if the celestial dragons were killed, the final result would be obvious. There will definitely be endless troubles. However, Monet looked at the murderous intent in Zoan's eyes and thought helplessly, Who let me get such a master? Forget it. Since he is my master, isn't it right to accompany him through fire and water? Advertisement, sister. This person is so stupid. Sandang pointed at Ebonard, although he was cute, but silently mocked. Humble woman, I will give you to the lowest beggars. Ebonard was immediately angry. He had this idea about the two girls, but now he was completely angry. Room slash. The purple space suddenly opened up, and the invisible purple light drew beautiful traces in the air. The target was the celestial dragons who seemed to be sitting there without noticing. Zoan's smile became more and more ferocious. Iron body, armament color. Bang! 3 black shadows suddenly rushed out from the darkness, forming a triangular shape to surround Ebonard's figure. At the same time, their bodies showed extremely irregular twists, and they actually formed something like a sphere, blocking all of Zoan's attacks. The attack dissipated, and the 3 black shadows fell to the ground. They looked calm, wearing black suits, black hats, and expressionless faces. No human breath could be felt on them, giving people the feeling of robots. Finally came out. It seems that you still need to protect this monkey. Zoan was not surprised at all, but smiled and said. From the moment he landed on the ship, Zoan had already felt the breath of these people. The breath of these people was very strange. Zoan thought about it for a while and estimated that it was the CP directly under the world government that stopped it, but he didn't know which CP it was. Of course, Zoan had no interest in them. What he was most interested in was the training method of Marine 6 styles. That was what Zoan was most interested in. If we talk about the powerful physical skills in the pirate world, Fishman Karate is one, and Marine 6 styles is definitely one. Zoan naturally wanted to get it. Although he had the qualifications to reach the top, he never gave up on his body and physical skills. CP6 organization. Zoan, put down your weapons and surrender immediately. The black-clad man in the lead said coldly. It was not ruthless but emotionless. That ruthless voice made Zoan frown. It seemed that their feelings had long been tempered and disappeared. Advertisement, how dare the lowly human. Ebonard finally reacted at this time and immediately cursed. Room air explosion. Shave. Ah. A series of changes attracted almost everyone's attention. The explosion suddenly sounded on Ibnad's body. The black-clad CP6 members rushed to rescue him. Unfortunately, even though they were extremely fast, Ibnad was almost blown up half of his body. Although he was not dead yet, he was definitely not far from death. I forgot to tell you, celestial dragons is like a dead dog to me. How dare you threaten me? Zoan held his forehead with one hand, trembling and laughing, and said cruelly, Kill him. Kill him. You must kill him for me. Ibnad, who was struggling violently, roared like a mad dog. The CP6 organization did not answer, but they definitely did not intend to kill him. Zoan's op fruit was specifically requested by the top level of the 5 Elders world government. If he was killed, how would he explain it? Celestial dragons. CP organization. If we kill them, will we really become enemies with the entire world government? As the war approached, Zoan asked Monet with interest, smiling. Master, you have become an enemy of the world. Monet said helplessly. That's right, that's right. Sugar also shouted. Just what I want. 052. You want to be the enemy of the world? Even the leader of CP6, the man in a suit, couldn't help showing a look of astonishment. His tone fluctuated, and he asked with a little surprise, "Be the enemy of the world?" Zoan sneered disdainfully. "Don't treat me as those idiots. The new world emperors are fighting for hegemony, and the Grand Line heroes are rising. These people are not one with your world, right? What's more, the moment I ate the fruit, I was already a dead man in the eyes of the world government." Everyone shut up about Zoan's words. Of course, they knew it was the truth, but they couldn't respond, otherwise the result would be over. What are you idiots waiting for? This arrogant guy wants to be the enemy of the noble celestial dragons. Kill him! Kill him! Ibnad roared like a wild dog. Yes. The three members of CP6 stared at Zoan and suddenly took action. Not bad speed, but it's too far behind. Zoan seemed to be admiring and sighing. 100,000 tons. Bang! Standing in place without moving a step, Zoan slightly turned sideways, and the attacks of the two men in black were easily avoided. A cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his hands stretched out at the same time, as fast as lightning, and reached out in a flash. The two spies stared at Zoan's movements. They wanted to escape, but Zoan's speed was too fast, so fast that they had no way to escape. A punch pierced through the heart and the entire chest, and a bloody wound appeared on the bodies of the two CP6 members. Without any pain, they fell to the ground and died. "How dare you!" The sudden change also frightened Ibnad, and he shouted hurriedly, "Advertisement, I've heard enough of your nonsense." Zoan suddenly took a step forward and came to him as if teleporting, and gently pressed his palm on Ibnad's body and said softly, "Explode." Bang, bang, bang. The continuous explosions were endless, and Ibnad's screams made the originally terrified guards around him rush up like they didn't care about their lives. "Kill. Kill him. We must kill him. Otherwise we will all die." Monet smiled disdainfully at the guards. These people were much worse than the elite Marines. In fact, Ibnad deserved it. The escort of Tianshangjian should have been the responsibility of Vice Admiral, equipped with a warship and hundreds of elite Marines. But Ibnad was so arrogant that he directly abandoned the Marine configuration and used his own ship for escort. As a result, he was attacked by Zoan, which led to this situation. "Wind and snow," Monet said softly. The snowflakes in the sky stopped all the guards, and of course took away their lives. "It's so boring. Is this all the CP6 organization can do?" Zoan tilted his head and looked at the man in black who could only defend himself under his attack, and said boringly, "I thought the members of the CP organization should be quite strong, but it turned out that they only have this little ability. As expected, as an organization operating in secret, their combat effectiveness in public is still much worse." Without words, he slid between his feet and came up like a phantom. Room death cut. Advertisement, it's useless. The power of fruit is useless to me. Puff, unfortunately, he had not finished his arrogant words. He had already fallen to the ground. His body had disappeared at some point, and only his head and a heart were left in Zoan's hands. He shook his head in boredom, and Zoan turned around with the heart and head and said, "Monet, pack up all the valuables and get rid of these people. After all, it's a robbery, and celestial dragons can't be too shabby." "Yes, my master." The snowflakes in the sky condensed into Monet's figure, bowed slightly, and said with a smile, "Okay, it's time to get rid of you." Turning his head, Monet smiled gently. Snow dance. The snowflakes in the sky brought blood flowers all over the sky. "Then what's next?" Zoan smiled lightly and walked into the pirate ship with the members of the CP organization. "Please enjoy the next game." "Ah." A series of miserable screams that seemed to be the end of the family line resounded throughout the pirate ship. Sucrose stood on the deck fiddling with the doll and said helplessly, "Really, the master has started again. But if it is the assassination organization, it should be able to last a long time, right?" "Really, it lasted a long time." Zoan came out in less than half an hour and said with a smile, "Marine 6 Styles is in hand." Even the CP organization, which is an elite intelligence officer, faced Zoan's inhuman torture, and Zoan's current strength is completely different from the past. In just half an hour, he was tortured more than 30 times, and finally told everything obediently. Read books every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 053. Master. Zwakong just walked out of the cabin and heard Monet shouting loudly beside him. Huh. Turning his head with a little surprise, Zwakong looked at Monet and was slightly stunned. Monet stood on the bow of celestial dragons with one foot, her hands around the moon, her chest, proudly raised her head, with a haughty smile, looking like a noble queen. Stinky girl, what are you doing? Zwakong asked strangely. With Zwakong's words, Monet's queen temperament was immediately broken. She immediately looked at Zwakong helplessly with resentment. I don't know if she thought Zwakong had done something that angered the heaven and the people. Zwakong just glanced at it and didn't care at all. In fact, he had long been accustomed to it. Monet always looked at him with this kind of eyes because of the huge workload. Naturally, he got used to it over time. Hurry up, move the things out. Monet turned his head helplessly when he saw Zwakong's appearance and immediately shouted at the guards. Yes, queen. Looking at the panicking guards, Zwakong curled his lips and thought to himself, this girl, queen? You haven't seen the real queen. Your temperament is much worse than that of the Queen Hancock. Advertisement, be careful, everyone. If something unexpected happens, you will jump down and feed the sea kings. Monet continued to scold. Yes. Soon, the guards forced by Monet's majesty moved the 30 boxes that had been sorted long ago to Zwakong's ship and placed them neatly on the deck. Master, these are the heavenly gold. Monet floated to Zwakong's side and said softly, Heavenly gold? Zwakong was also very curious. He murmured, Yes, these are the heavenly gold tribute to celestial dragons. All of them. Monet said very calmly. It's really interesting. Zwakong smiled and curiously opened one of the boxes. After all, everyone knew that the heavenly gold was offered to celestial dragons, but apart from celestial dragons, few people actually knew what heavenly gold was. Wow. 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 The dazzling light immediately filled everyone's eyes. Zwakong blinked and looked at this gold-like thing. After a long time, he said strangely, Is heavenly gold gold? Master, what do you think it should be? Monet asked helplessly. Tisk. Zwakong curled his lips and said disdainfully, This is boring. I thought it was something high-end, but it turned out to be gold. However, I heard that some countries almost perished because of the gold in the sky. This is only 30 boxes of gold. It shouldn't be. Please forgive Zwakong. He really has no concept of money. The underground forces of Doflamingo, which robbed the entire North Blue, gave Zwakong too much Bailey. Although Zwakong did not do all kinds of burning, killing, and looting, he definitely did not hold back on those pirates and marines, so he was not short of money at all. Hey, master, these golds are actually specially refined pure gold. It's good to be able to refine a piece of pure gold from 1,000 kilograms of gold. Monet sighed helplessly, rubbed his eyebrows and said helplessly, I don't care. Anyway, I never care so much. Money is just a number to me. Zwakong waved his hand and said indifferently, Yes, it's my master. Monet nodded helplessly. When he turned his head, snowflakes were flashing in his palms and blood dripped on the ground. All the remaining guards were killed. By the way, master, I found a few interesting people. You will definitely be interested. After dealing with these guards, Monet suddenly said mysteriously, Who would I be interested in? Zwakong tilted his head and said strangely, Room. Advertisement with a hook of his palm. All the corpses disappeared, and the bloodline on the deck disappeared without a trace. Hurry up, you three. Don't waste time there. Monet shouted loudly. Zwakong looked in the direction of Monet's shouting and saw 3 girls coming out. They were tall and slender. Although they were dressed in rags, they could be seen from their figures that they would definitely be top beauties in the future. The only flaw was that their faces were dirty. One with black hair, one with orange hair, and one with green hair. Not to mention that the 3 women all looked very individual. Hey, Monet, am I a pervert in your heart? Although I do like to collect beauties. Zwakong curled his lips and said nonchalantly. He did not hide his desire at all. It is better to be a pirate to be real. If you want something, just grab it. If you are like a hypocrite, are you still a pirate? You. Hello. The 3 girls lowered their heads nervously and said timidly, Yeah. Zwakong nodded lightly, looking at the 3 girls, but after a closer look, he found that they seemed familiar. He always felt as if he had seen them somewhere. Have fun reading books every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 054. Wait. Zwakong suddenly raised his head and said strangely, You 3 sisters, Raise your head so I can see. We. The black-haired girl said hesitantly. Didn't you hear the master's order? Monet said coldly with cold eyes. The piercing murderous intent immediately penetrated the body, and the three sisters couldn't help trembling all over. Although they were born in a nation where everyone was fighting, they were still young after all. In addition, they were captured by human traffickers. After seeing Monet's cruelty, they immediately became honest. Yes, the three sisters said bitterly. They raised their heads with difficulty, wondering if Swakong was going to these three girls. Look, Master, these are three very iconic girls. It is absolutely the most suitable to train them as maids. Three dirty but exquisite faces were immediately revealed. Monet chattered and said very excitedly. Swakong did not answer immediately, but just looked at the three girls. The black-haired girl in the lead looked at Swakong firmly, and the other orange-haired and green-haired girls were all nervously shrinking behind the black-haired girl, not daring to look at Swakong at all. Not bad. It seems that it is you three. Swakong nodded and said with certainty. What do you mean, the three of them? Master, do you know them? Monet asked curiously. Well, Master, are you familiar with these three big sisters? Little Sandang smiled cutely. Sandang's cute appearance immediately attracted the favor of the three girls. Unlike Monet's ruthlessness and Swakong, who was affected by the love of the house, Sandang's appearance is really very deceptive. However, Swakong and Monet sighed at the same time. Sandang is a very black-bellied child. Whenever she shows such an expression, it is the time when the black-bellied comes. Not bad. Sister will give it to you to train. It's not bad to be a meat XX for the master at that time. Sandang looked at the three girls, seemed to be very cute and pinched the skin of the three girls, and said very hockey. The three girls were completely petrified in an instant, and Monet couldn't help but laugh. Swakong curled his lips, as if it was just what he expected, and walked forward to hold Shatang in his arms, patted her little head, and suddenly reached out to lift the black-haired girl's delicate chin, revealing an interesting look, and said lightly, Tell me what your name is. Remember never to lie, otherwise. Advertisement. Looking at Swakong shaking his fingers, the black-haired girl seemed to feel the hellish scenery from Swakong's red eyes, and the whole person couldn't help shuddering. My name is Boa Hancock. They are my sisters. The black-haired girl, no. Hancock finally got nervous and trembling. Hancock really didn't dare to lie. She wasn't sure if she would be killed directly in the end if she lied, but she was afraid. Very honest little girl. What are your names? Swakong turned his head and looked at the other green-haired girl and the orange-haired girl and asked, My name is Boa Sandersonia. My name is Boa Marigold. Both girls trembled and said their names. Swakong looked like a demon who killed people without blinking an eye. He thought that he and others would be torn apart in the next second, but in fact, it was almost the same. Yeah, Swakong nodded, rubbed his chin, and looked at the three women, as if he was thinking about how to get rid of them. Forget it. Monet, take these three women downstairs to wash up first. How can they be crew members on my ship when they are so dirty? Swakong waved his hand and said casually, We are not crew members on your ship. Hancock suddenly said firmly. Swakong looked at Hancock with interest. Although his dark eyes were afraid, they stared at Swakong firmly. He said very firmly, I am a member of the Nine Snake Island. I want to be a member of the Nine Snake Pirates in the future. I want. Advertisement, good belief. Swakong rubbed the little head of sugar and said as if in admiration. But, as soon as the topic changed, Swakong's murderous intent immediately spread, and he said with a cracked mouth, Hancock, remember that you are now my captive. You must leave first and pay enough. You should be glad that you are a beauty, otherwise you would be in the belly of sea kings now. Hancock opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. His beauty saved his life again. He was captured as a slave because of his beauty, but his beauty saved him because he was going to be auctioned for greater benefits, and now his beauty saved him again. Okay, stop talking nonsense. Monet, take them down, Swakong said impatiently. Yes, my master. Monet turned his head and looked at the three women and said, Let's go. It's better to be obedient on our ship. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the master will do. The three women immediately followed Monet and left obediently. Swakong just glanced at the three girls and shook his head, then lay down on the recliner again, and said with an amused smile, The three future Empress sisters are really interesting, but they killed the celestial dragons, killed the CP organization, and took away the heavenly gold. Let me see what Marine will do. Ha 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 ha. 055. Women are extremely slow in washing and dressing, no matter what kind of women they are. Zoan was almost asleep when Monet came out with the three Hancock sisters. Master. Monet looked at Zoan with a smile on his face and called softly. Not bad. Not bad. Zoan raised his head and put the sugar on the ground, looked at the three Hancock sisters, and immediately smiled with satisfaction. The three women didn't dare to say a word, and looked at Zoan nervously. Hancock's eyes were full of tension. She didn't know what to do in this situation. Monet was silent, although she was a little dissatisfied in her heart. After all, her master hadn't touched her for such a long time, and he actually wanted to touch three little girls. How could it be comfortable? It's boring. Three little girls. It's boring. Forget it. Forget it. Zoan pouted and said indifferently. What do you mean? Zoan gave up, but Hancock was very happy and said dissatisfiedly. Hancock regretted it as soon as he said it. What was he doing? Zoan had already laid down, but he stood up again. Little girl, are you provoking me? Zoan walked to Hancock with big strides, squinting his eyes, and said condescendingly and interestingly. Although he was about 15 years old, Zoan's intense training had made his body develop in advance. His tall figure of more than 1.8 meters could be said to be condescending to Hancock, a beautiful woman who had not yet grown up. Me. You. He. Hancock was speechless for a moment, but seeing the disdain in Zoan's eyes, he immediately said very proudly like a peacock, Do you look down on me? Yes. It can be regarded as a deep sisterly love, so you should warm my bed tonight. Remember, if you don't go, I will throw your sister down to feed the sea kings. Zoan hooked his lips, looked at Hancock's pretending, and said evilly. I know. Seeing the fearful eyes of the two sisters behind him, Hancock gritted his teeth and finally said firmly, Advertisement very good. Zoan nodded with satisfaction. Then he ignored the three girls. In fact, Zoan thought strangely in his heart. It's really strange. Although Sander, Sonia, and Marigold are not top beauties, they can also be rated 75 points. How will the future be biased? Time is really a butcher knife. Then it was time to do what should be done. Monet took the three Hancock sisters to prepare dinner, while Zoan continued to exercise. As for the girl like Sandang, she was playing with dolls. After dinner, Zoan walked into the room under Monet's helpless eyes. Crack. The door was pushed open, and Hancock, who was only wearing white pajamas, immediately stiffened all over. The beautiful woman who had washed and smelled fragrant looked at Zoan nervously, not knowing what to do. Hancock, how is Nuanchuang? Zoan still stimulated, and said disdainfully. Of course it's okay. As expected, Hancock's irritable personality couldn't stand such stimulation at all, and he immediately responded arrogantly. Yeah, not bad. Zoan lifted the quilt and went in wearing only a big pantyhose, and directly hugged Hancock's delicate body in his arms and touched it up and down. But if you look closely, you will find that Zoan's eyes do not have too much desire and obsession. What do you want to do? Hancock said nervously. What? Of course I hold you to sleep. Zoan yawned and said very lazily. Are you looking down on me? Hancock immediately stopped and said unwillingly. Is this looking down on your own beauty? Zoan couldn't help laughing and said, You little girl are really interesting. I touch you and you feel scared. I don't touch you and you feel insulted. What should I do? I. Advertisement, Hancock said for a long time and finally closed his mouth obediently. Of course, it would be best if he could not lose his mind. But this man won't. Hancock couldn't help thinking strangely in his heart. Little girl, remember I won't touch you. But now you don't even have the qualifications for me to touch you. You are too weak. So weak that I don't even have interest. Zoan said lightly. Humph. Hancock snorted proudly and closed his eyes with difficulty, not knowing what he was thinking. At this time, the door of the room suddenly opened. Master. Monet walked to Zoan's bed and said firmly. Monet? Zoan just raised his head and immediately showed a strange look. Monet had already pounced on him and said aggrievedly, Why would the master rather be good to this girl? Zoan was also a little speechless. Did he just suddenly think of teasing Hancock? Master. But it was obvious that Monet didn't want to think so much, and he lowered his head and kissed Zoan directly. The night was dark and windy, and the beauty was tender, which naturally triggered a fierce battle. Hancock was also dragged into the war and lost a lot. Read books every day during the 11th. Top up 100 and get 500 VIP points. Top up now, Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 056. Opening his eyes for the first time in a daze, Zoan found himself being caught, with Monet on the left and Hancock on the right. Both women were hugging him tightly, and Hancock was very dishonest and put her slender and perfect legs on his body, which almost made Zoan excited again. Ah, master. Monet opened her eyes in a daze. When she saw everything clearly and her brain recovered her memory again, she immediately screamed and covered herself with the quilt, saying shyly, "What are you arguing about so early in the morning? Believe it or not, I will kill you," Hancock said arrogantly in a daze. "Monet, you were very proactive last night, okay? And you, Hancock, don't forget that you are a captive of mine." Zoan teased Monet and looked at Hancock helplessly. He really didn't understand where she got her confidence from, and said helplessly, "Ah, well," a more intense scream sounded. Hancock suddenly pulled the quilt over, looked at Zoan nervously, and said excitedly, You man, actually insulted my pure white body." "Shut up," Zoan roared very angrily. Woo-woo. Under Zoan's tyranny, Monet and Hancock both shut their mouths obediently. As the saying goes, 2 women are equal to 300 ducks, and Zoan now feels it. Rubbing his eyebrows helplessly, Zoan said, "Hancock, I have said it before, you are not worthy of my eyes now. When you really become the pirate queen and deserve the title of I will take away your innocence." Although Hancock was angry in his heart, he didn't dare to say much. It was the best that his innocence was still there. Zoan took Monet's first time last night, but to be honest, Zoan still looked down on Hancock. Of course, it's not that he looked down on Hancock's appearance, but that he looked down on Hancock's current identity. Advertisement now, she is just a little girl called a captive, not the future pirate queen. Even if you want to take away her innocence, you must do it after she is called the pirate queen. At that time, you will not only feel the sense of physical conquest, but also the sense of spiritual conquest. The pirate queen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Such a woman was conquered by him and pressed under him. Thinking of that feeling, Zoan showed a weird smile. Ha, ha, ha. Panting heavily, Zoan had just finished a day of heavy training. As for the 3 sisters Hancock beside him, they had completely collapsed on the ground and were being watered by the little girl Sandang. "Marine is so slow. I killed celestial dragons and borrowed the sky gold, but there was no reaction for a month," Zoan said to himself with interest. "You killed celestial dragons?" Hearing this, Hancock jumped up and said in horror, "Yeah? What's wrong?" Zoan looked at Hancock and said strangely. Hancock really wanted to spray a mouthful of salt soda on Zoan's face at this moment. "What's wrong? That's celestial dragons? That's the world's nobles? Are you going to be an enemy of the whole world?" Hancock thought Zoan had let the celestial dragons go, so he took away the Tianshengzhen, but it turned out that he had killed the celestial dragons directly. However, Hancock still felt happy in his heart. Although he was not branded as a slave, he still hated the celestial dragons. Zoan casually put Hancock, who was walking to his side, into his arms and said indifferently, "Isn't it just a celestial dragon? If you want, I will rush to the Holy Land Mariehua one day to kill a few celestial dragons for you to see." Advertisement. Hancock was so surprised that he couldn't speak. She didn't care about Zoan's actions. Hancock had gotten used to it in the past month. Hancock had been a bed warmer during this period. Zoan and Monet had *x every night, and then pulled Hancock into it. Except for the last step, Hancock was played all over by Zoan. "Remember, little girl, you are going to be the pirate queen. You don't need to be afraid, otherwise you don't even have the qualifications for me to push you down." Zoan comforted her softly, and suddenly said evilly, "Bad guy." Hancock rolled her eyes at Zoan coquettishly, and immediately stood up and sat aside. That look made the other 2 sisters shake their heads helplessly. They really wanted to ask, "Sister, do you know what we are in now? Is that the bad guy who kidnapped you?" The 3 Hancock sisters didn't actually hate Zoan that much. After all, he was well fed and helped you train. In addition to Hancock warming the bed every night, there was no other job. This man is also a man who can't come out. Hancock muttered shyly in his heart. Zoan killed the celestial dragons, and almost immediately raised Hancock's favorability to the maximum value. Boom. Suddenly, bubbles surged in the sea, and then a series of marine warships emerged from the sea, surrounding Zoan and others from all directions. Speak of the devil. Let me see what kind of encirclement the Marine has prepared for me. Zoan stood up with a smile and said interestingly, a purple space has been opened in the center of the palm. Read books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 057. Master, we are surrounded from all sides. Monet shouted loudly. I'm not blind. I can see such an obvious encirclement. Zoan said helplessly to Monet's fuss. However, Zoan was also solemn in his heart. This time it was not a small problem. Not only because he ate op fruit, he also killed celestial dragons, robbed Tianshengjian, and killed members of the CP organization. No matter which one, it was enough for him to die 800 times. Pa! A series of bubbles were broken, and Zoan stood up and jumped to the bow. Although he had just been trained, he had almost recovered now. Isn't this Akiji? Long time no see. Have you recovered from the last injury? Zoan looked at the tall figure standing opposite the warship and immediately greeted him with a smile. Zoan, surrender. Akiji was not angry, but still said lazily, surrender. Do you think that's me? Zoan shrugged and asked helplessly. Of course it's not you. I just asked casually. Akiji was not polite and said very calmly. This time Zoan also shook his head helplessly. What's the matter? When did the lazy Akiji become so choking? Okay. At this time, an old voice came out, and a woman walked out from the deck of the warship. Zoan saw the person coming, his face sank slightly, and asked solemnly but with a smile, isn't this he Vice Admiral? Why don't you go to catch Doflamingo and come here to catch me? Advertisement now Zoan understood. No wonder Marine's brain actually knew that the submarine eagle was coded after the coding, which was obviously his credit. It seems that this is none of your business, right? He said calmly. Ha ha ha. Zoan laughed loudly, with a fierce anger in his eyes, and said coldly, why is it none of my business? I have long wanted to kill that be asterisk 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 d Doflamingo. Unfortunately, you will never have that day. Hand over the Tianshengjian and surrender obediently. He didn't care about Zoan's murderous aura. How could someone who came from the era of the Three Kings be an ordinary person? He said very calmly. I'm so sorry. I don't have the habit of surrendering, Zoan said with a pout. Ice cube, ice fist. Akiji glanced at Zoan, suddenly soared into the air, threw a punch, and the huge ice fist immediately soared into the sky. Are you looking down on me? Zoan laughed loudly. Shave. Search. Zoan also disappeared without a trace, raised his leg and kicked directly on the huge ice fist, whispering softly, 100,000 tons? Boom. The ice was directly shattered and fell in the air. Zoan and Akiji landed on the bow of the pirate ship and the warship respectively. Have you learned Marine 6 styles? Akiji looked at Zoan and asked with a frown. That group of idiot CP organizations provided me with very good things. Marine 6 styles is not bad, right? Zoan asked back with a smile. He looked at Zoan and suddenly said interestingly, Kid, do you know what these things you did represent? Are you against the world? Zoan said nonchalantly. Then you dare to kill celestial dragons and steal the sky gold. He said very calmly. Boom. His words were like a mine exploding in the flat ground. Of course, the world government would not let this kind of thing spread, otherwise it is unknown what kind of impact it would cause. After all, there were no onlookers, and almost everyone else was dead, so it was very easy to suppress this matter. However, as he said this now, everyone was shocked and speechless. Advertisement, he Vice Admiral, do you know my title? Devil. Then do you think I, as a devil, will be afraid? Zoan laughed cruelly. You are too dangerous and must be eliminated immediately, he said seriously. Then let's try it. Zoan dragged his palm up, and his smile became even crazier. Hey, are you crazy? That's the Admiral of Headquarters, and he Vice Admiral? You actually want to fight them, so run away. Hancock looked at Zoan's crazy look, hurriedly stopped Zoan, and said anxiously, Run away? Hancock, you little girl, just watch from the side. I won't run away, of course I will fight. Zoan glanced at Hancock, turned his head and said, This lunatic. Hancock thought for a long time and said angrily, My master is like this, otherwise you can try to jump into the sea and escape? Monet came over and said darkly, Your family is all crazy. Hancock cursed helplessly, but there was no way to prepare for the battle, otherwise, it would be a real wait for death. That's right. As my crew, you can't be cowardly even if you are a prisoner. Just do it. Room air bomb. Have fun reading every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Event time. October 1st to October 7th. 058. Search. A streak of frost passed by, and Akiji had disappeared from the spot. He clasped his hands in midair and whispered, "Ice Age." Bang. It felt like setting off firecrackers, but the fire was extinguished. Zoan raised his head and looked directly at Akiji, and said with an interesting smile, "I didn't expect that Admiral Akiji would figure out how to crack my trick." Crack, crack, crack. A series of crisp, freezing sounds reached everyone's ears, and they saw that an extremely large, semicircular space that almost covered the 24 ships was freezing rapidly, forming an ice-covered space from top to bottom. "It's amazing," Zoan said again in amazement. His heart became more and more solemn. It turned out that no admiral could be underestimated. Such a guy was simply a monster. He had figured out how to crack his trick in such a short time. "Give up, kid. Your trick has been completely blocked. You are no match for Akiji." He persuaded him to surrender lightly. In his opinion, it would be the best if Zoan could be taken down without using force, but this is basically impossible. Although it was only a brief contact, he, who was known as a think tank, had already seen that Zoan was a madman and would never surrender. It was even more impossible for him to surrender to Marine. This was just to hit Zoan's morale. "Really?" Zoan asked with a smile. Room slash. However, Zoan suddenly attacked again, and the invisible attack immediately whistled towards Akiji. "It's useless. The effect of your attack on the elementalization." Akiji shook his head and even slowly turned into ice, saying lazily, "Advertisement." Before he finished speaking, Akiji suddenly felt a bad breath and dodged in a hurry, but he was still a step slower, leaving several scars on his arms. Search. The air blade mixed with black light and purple just dissipated in the air, and Akiji suffered a loss because of his carelessness. "Admiral Akiji, you are too careless. Do you think I will be hit by the same trick for the second time?" Zoan said with a strange smile. "I see. The ability of the Op fruit is integrated with armament hockey to attack the Logia user," Crane said with interest after observing carefully for a moment. In fact, the ability of the Op fruit is not completely ineffective against Logia. If it is Zoan, he can easily cut it in half. This is a problem caused by strength. Akiji's speed is too fast. Even though the current 3 admirals focus on the ability of the fruit, they have been honing hockey for so many years, and it is still very scary. Akiji's observation hockey helped him dodge the ability of the Op fruit more quickly. Ice knife. Akiji exhaled a breath of cold air, and an ice knife immediately condensed in his palm, covered with a pitch-black light, which was the armament hockey. "Come on, Akiji. Let me continue to experience the power of Admiral." Zoan laughed loudly and soared into the sky, shouting. Bang! The long fist and the ice knife collided again, and the strong impact hit the surrounding ice layer, directly shattering the ice layer. Crack, crack, crack. The ice layer broke bit by bit, and the waves were shaken. The clouds in the sky in the center of the two people's fight had been scattered, and a small hole was formed on the sea surface. "Come on, come on." Advertisement, huh? Zoan was completely in a crazy state, his hands covered with hockey, and he directly jumped over the 1,000 tons and 10,000 tons added to his body. The terrifying power was enough to form a terrifying impact even with a punch or a kick. Awesome. It's so awesome. This is the fight I want. Another punch collided fiercely with Akiji's ice blade. Zoan actually burst out with terrifying power. With a crack sound, he directly shattered Akiji's ice blade. It was as fast as lightning. Finger pistol and tempest kick were completely unstoppable. This lunatic. Akiji cursed inwardly. Last time, he didn't feel so. This time, Akiji really felt that Zoan was a lunatic, and more importantly, this lunatic's power was improving too fast. Finger pistol, 500,000 tons. Crack. A crisp bone fracture came from Zoan's finger, but Zoan didn't care. He stabbed out with a wild laugh. How terrifying is it to combine the gravity of 500,000 tons with hockey? Boom. Akiji didn't even have time to defend himself, and was blown away by the terrifying impact and fell into the sea. The warship behind Akiji was instantly shattered into two halves by the terrifying impact. Ice Age. The sea surface began to freeze rapidly, and Akiji's figure condensed out from the ice, unscathed. but his face was extremely ugly. Devil, Akiji said in a low voice. Reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 059. Great. We're saved. It's Kazan Admiral. That's scary. Is that guy the devil? The Marines who were supposed to fall into the sea fell on the ice as Akiji froze the sea surface, and they all showed their relief for surviving the disaster. Akiji. Zoan also smiled and turned his head, his eyes completely fixed on Akiji below. His mouth curled up and suddenly disappeared without a trace. Shave. Bang! Zoan appeared out of thin air and kicked Akiji away with a high kick. This kid's power has become stronger than what Akiji described last time. If this continues, he frowned and whispered in a low voice. The last time such a monster appeared on the sea was not long ago. The man named Pirate King became stronger and stronger again and again, just like a monster, and never had a bottom line. The sea must not allow another Pirate King to appear again, and a devil Pirate King. Crane was silent for a long time, and said firmly, Ice two thorns. Akiji's figure appeared in the air with a swish sound, with a hook of his palm, completely different from the last time. The ice spears in the sky immediately condensed and pierced through the space at the moment of condensation. Room gravity space. Ha ha ha. Zoan hooked his palm, and the purple space immediately unfolded. Although he was in a crazy state now, being in a crazy state did not mean that he was a madman. He had nothing to do and went up to directly withstand Akiji's attack. Advertisement boom. Akiji frowned slightly and thought to himself, this kid is not completely out of his mind. Ha ha ha. Akiji, where are you looking at? Zoan suddenly broke through the smoke and shouted with a wild laugh. Devil. Akiji also shouted in a low voice. Come on, let me see the power of Marine Admiral. Let me know the power of this world. Maybe that will make me afraid. Zoan laughed and roared wildly. That ferocious expression and crazy face at this moment, even Hancock had no illusions. Is this really Zoan? Hancock couldn't help but murmur in his heart. Although the ordinary Zoan also has a bad temper, he is definitely not a crazy person, and he is a very lazy and even a little black-bellied person, but at this moment, I don't know why Hancock feels a sense of security inexplicably. Ice cubes, small ice fists. Akiji stopped talking nonsense. His hands were covered with ice, and he actually condensed 2 small ice fists on his hands. For a moment, Akiji raised 2 fists that were completely out of place with himself, which was very funny, but no one dared to laugh. Everyone was watching this battle nervously. That's right, otherwise it would be meaningless. Licking the corner of his mouth, Zoan said with a wicked smile, Since you have shown your true ability, I have to show off my ability. 100,000 tons. Zoan whispered, and suddenly rose from the ground, pointed his 2 fingers continuously, and roared, Finger pistol 10,000 tons, continuous fire. Freezing moment. With a low roar, Akiji rushed forward and released terrifying cold air from his 2 hands, hugging Zoan directly. Even more cold air instantly spread along Zoan's fingers and spread all over his body. Crack. Advertisement. After a moment, the lifelike ice sculpture was immediately revealed. Great. Akiji Admiral won. This is inevitable. Akiji Admiral is the strongest fighter in Marine. What devil, haha. Crack. Unfortunately, before Marine could cheer up completely, the ice cracked in the indifferent and astonished eyes of Monet and Hancock. Zoan moved his body slightly and walked out, saying with a smile, Akiji, it's over now. You underestimated me too much, right? I never thought it was over like this. Akiji said indifferently. Boom, a deep pit was washed out of the ice surface under Zoan's action, and Zoan rushed up again and launched a fierce attack. This guy. Akiji cursed in his heart. It's no wonder that Akiji cursed inwardly. Zoan completely gave up defense and relied on the terrible ability of Audiobook Fruit to directly launch a crazy ghost-like attack. The ton pressure ability was at least maintained at 10 tons, and basically 50 tons. Even Akiji would never want to accept that terrifying amount of power. What made Akiji even more frustrated was that his long-range attack was basically crushed, and the close-range attack was directly teleported. For a moment, Akiji was completely suppressed. I am not dreaming, am I? Hancock was stunned with surprise, and his cute little mouth grew into an O shape, and he said in astonishment, Sister, I don't think so. The second sister Sonia also said in astonishment. Marigold on the side also nodded hurriedly. Obviously, the three sisters were completely shocked by Zwakong's terrible fighting power. Boom. Reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 060. Crack. A deep pit was created in the ice layer, and Zwakong's figure appeared in the sky, while Akiji was lying in the deep pit on the ground. Room life assembly. How? Zwakong's palm slightly hooked, and the purple light immediately permeated the twisted arm, quickly recovering from the injury, and smiled. Ahem. Akiji coughed softly, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He wiped off the bloodline casually, and Akiji stood up and stared at Zwakong. This guy was too terrifying. He, Vice Admiral, let us take action. Doberman suddenly walked behind he and shouted loudly. At this moment, Doberman was suppressing his anger in his heart. Last time, he was almost killed by Zwakong, and finally healed his injuries with difficulty. Now that the enemy is so close, it's no wonder that Doberman can't help it. Don't argue. He waved his hand to stop Doberman's words and said lightly. Turning his head, he fixed his eyes on the members on the ship. He then smiled interestingly. You are still a passionate person, with so many beautiful girls? Doberman, capture all of them. Remember to capture them alive. He gave an order lightly. Yes, he Vice Admiral. Doberman soared into the sky and shouted. Zwakong and Akiji stood on the ice and stared at each other. There was a very strange situation between the two sides. It seemed that they did not notice Doberman, who suddenly rose. Aren't you afraid? Akiji suddenly asked. Advertisement, what are you afraid of? Zwakong asked back with a smile. The members on your ship are not as good as Vice Admiral Doberman, not to mention that Doberman is a strong man among Vice Admirals, Akiji said very calmly. Zwakong's mouth cracked, and he smiled and said, Don't worry about it, let's continue our battle. As for Doberman, if my men can't even deal with a Vice Admiral, what qualifications do they have to be my men? I don't want to say that Vice Admiral is trash. Akiji rubbed his eyebrows and said lazily again. Who knows? Zwakong shrugged and said indifferently. Bang! Two deep pits appeared on the flat surface, and the two people attacked again. Little devils, die! Doberman stepped onto the pirate ship and roared loudly immediately. He couldn't stand it anymore. Being bullied by Zwakong like this, Doberman now only wanted to kill people. If it wasn't for his order to capture them alive, there would be no so much nonsense, and he would just go up and kill Monet and a few people. What should we do? Sonia and Marigold looked at Hancock nervously and asked hurriedly. With me here, no one can hurt you. Hancock stood up firmly, stood in front of the two sisters, and said firmly, What a brave confidence. Doberman sneered. In his opinion, the most threatening member of the group was Monet with Snow Fruit, but last time it was because of Tiger's restraint, and now how could these guys be his opponents? Advertisement, what a terrible arrogance. Monet imitated Doberman's tone and sneered. It must be said that Monet's imitation was really subtle and slightly raised, and people even felt that the two people were not the same person. Sonia and Marigold couldn't help but smile, and their fear immediately subsided a lot. Woman, you are looking for death. Doberman was furious and rushed up directly with a big knife. The sharp knife energy had already broken the wooden planks of the deck and roared. Really? Monet shook his head helplessly, turned around and let the figure behind him out, shrugged and complained, You are an idiot. Stay here forever today. Sugar came out with a red stuffed bear in her arms, as if she didn't see Doberman's terrifying attack at all, but was still fiddling with the stuffed bear in her hand. Is this little girl the one who has the ability of the childlike fruit? Crane looked at Sugar's figure and said with interest. Suddenly, his brain suddenly thought of something, the strange thing in North Blue, and immediately said in his heart, Not good. Roar. With a roar that shook the earth, the stuffed bear in Sugar's arms turned into a terrifying monster over 5 meters long in an instant, with a red body and scarlet eyes emitting a terrifying devil-like gaze, emitting a breath that makes people tremble with fear. What is this? Doberman murmured in confusion. But whether he was doubtful or not, Doberman was a vice admiral, and a strong one among the vice admirals. Of course, he could feel the power of the teddy bear and immediately became serious. Roar. Another roar. The teddy bear slapped him directly, and Doberman hurriedly went up to meet him. But then a terrifying force came directly from the bear's claws, and Doberman flew backwards completely out of control. Have fun reading every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 061. How is this possible? Doberman turned and fell to the ground, saying in astonishment. Sugar did not answer, nor could he answer, but whispered, "Raging bear, bear, bear. Roar." The red color of the doll bear became more intense, and after a wild roar, it rushed directly towards Doberman with heavy steps. Is this the ability of the childlike fruit? Akiji asked with a little surprise as he glanced at the terrifying doll bear that was almost sweeping across. Bang! Zoan suddenly broke through the air and rushed out from under the ice. He punched Akiji hard, jumped back, hooked his palm and shouted, "Room air explosion! Room gravity space!" Boom! The terrifying roar immediately resounded throughout the space, and the scattered ice dissipated in the air. But in an instant Akiji appeared again, as if he had anticipated this situation a long time ago, and Zoan rushed up again. Ice, ice arrow. Akiji raised his palm, and the ice in the sky condensed into countless arrows, which suddenly whistled towards Zoan. Search. The arrows brushed past Zoan. Although they did not touch him, the arrows that brushed past him actually brought an extremely terrifying cold air. Zoan's arm was actually sealed. Although it was shattered in just an instant, he could not help but take it seriously. Room. Ice, ice wall. Advertisement at the same time when Zoan disappeared. Akiji suddenly raised his palm, and the huge ice formed an extremely hard wall, which immediately blocked Zoan in front of him and blocked the suffocating punch. Boom! The ice surface broke, revealing Zoan's smile, laughing, "Ha ha ha, I really can't relax at all. I didn't expect that such a simple trick would have such an effect." Huh. Akiji frowned slightly. Room gravity scalpel. Akiji looked at the hand that suddenly pressed on his abdomen, and suddenly a gravity came through his heart. Puff. The ice in the sky dissipated, and Zoan did not pursue the victory, but stood there with a cold smile on his face. It's really fast. Zoan sneered and praised. Even faster. This kid has become stronger again in the battle. Akiji grabbed the mouth of Yu Xiang with one hand, as if he was grabbing something sharp, thinking secretly in his heart. Tick, tick, tick. The blood fell from Akiji's heart to the ground, affecting the hearts of all Marines. They never thought that the strongest Marine admiral, who was invincible in their hearts, was injured. TSK, is it just a little bit short? Zoan cursed with a little unwillingness. The scalpel pierced Akiji's skin, but it only pierced the skin and did not touch the heart at all. Otherwise, Zoan would have caused fatal damage at that moment. Unfortunately, there is no if. This little devil. He narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking solemnly. She did not expect this situation. Although Akiji was injured by Zoan last time, it was actually because Akiji needed to save Doberman and Marine, so he was injured by Zoan. Advertisement, but this time. The two of them fought head-on, but they were injured by Zoan. As an old man, he can clearly confirm that if Zoan's final attack had not been implemented, he would not even feel the breath in it. This is the most strange thing. Very strange attack. Akiji thought secretly in his heart. Akiji, be careful. Zoan was in a dominant position and immediately smiled cruelly. Room death cut. Search, search, search. Accompanied by the sudden appearance of black light, Akiji had several more wounds on his body. It was the same. An attack that could not be felt at all, as if it had never appeared. No sound, no breath. This is the most weird thing. Sure enough, I still can't kill Akiji, Zoan thought unwillingly. Even if he used the power of the silence fruit to hide the sound and breath of the attack, it was obviously not obvious to kill Akiji. At most, he could only injure Akiji. But injuring Akiji was useless. Marine's medical skills were the most powerful in this era, and ordinary injuries were useless. In that case, Zoan's hands suddenly clenched into fists, thinking firmly. It's better to destroy one arm than to break his hands. Since Akiji can't be killed, then he will cause him enough damage to remember it for the rest of his life. Buzz. The purple space seemed to gather into a solid, gathering on Zoan's fists. Zoan sneered. Akiji Admiral, be careful next time, otherwise you will die. Reading is fun every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 062. Ice cubes. Ice fists. This time Akiji had no intention of waiting and took the initiative, raising his hands, and 2 ice fists rushed out immediately. At the same time, Akiji followed closely behind, exuding a chill that made people tremble with fear. Boom. Zoan didn't waste any words and immediately soared into the sky to meet Akiji's attack. The black haki covered his fists, and the terrifying power burst out. Zoan roared. 100,000 tons. The ice fist exploded, but at the same time, Akiji's figure had rushed in front of Zoan, and one hand was aimed at the position of Zoan's moon chest. Zoan couldn't dodge in time, with a little madness in his eyes, and he simply didn't dodge, and the same palm was aimed at Akiji's moon chest. This lunatic. He cursed secretly. Freezing moment. Room, gravity scalpel. Boom. Bang. The violent explosion resounded throughout the battlefield. But this was not the end. At the same time, 2 figures were brushed out from the smoke above the ice. Akiji's mouth corners once again had a trace of blood, and Zoan's mouth was completely blown open. Bang, 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 master. Monet shouted in horror. Which bad guy wouldn't do that? Hancock also covered his mouth nervously, thinking anxiously in his heart. Hancock himself didn't realize that his innocent body fell into Zoan's hands. He was captured by Zoan, and he was forced every day. Why did he still worry about Zoan? Maybe this was a subconscious action. Gotcha. Advertisement. Zoan endured the wound, and suddenly fell to the ground with a backflip in the air. The powerful force directly penetrated the ice surface into 2 deep pits. Only then did he stop with difficulty, his face pale and gasping for breath. What a terrible attack. Even so, Zoan still said with a cruel smile. Crack! The ice broke. Akiji disintegrated into ice and condensed into ice again, saying lightly, just at that moment, you were still able to dodge my attack. Don't talk so nicely. 500,000 tons of pressure directly pressed on your heart, even with the double defense of elementalization and armament haki. Are you feeling well now? Zoan bluntly exposed Akiji's nonsense and said bluntly. Akiji was silent. It was indeed okay to have 500,000 tons of pressure suddenly pressed on his body. My body could still withstand it, but it was directly pressed on the heart, and the internal organs were the most fragile. How could it be so simple? Room life assembly. A purple light appeared on his palm, and Zoan pressed on his own chest. The wound healed quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even all the injuries on his body recovered in an instant. If it weren't for the worn-out clothes, I'm afraid no one would have thought that Zoan had experienced such a fierce battle. This is the trick Akiji mentioned. Has this kid developed the Audiobook fruit to this extent? He murmured solemnly. This kind of recovery is simply heaven-defying, but looking at Zoan's pale face, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seems that the consumption of physical strength is extremely huge. But if, he suddenly thought with a trace of panic, if the figure dancing like a lion is cured by Zoan's Audiobook fruit, what terrible waves will it bring to this turbulent sea? This is unimaginable. Akiji, come on, continue. Zoan lowered his body slightly, and the muscles of his arms surged violently, and he roared like a devil with crazy hideousness. This kid, Akiji thought helplessly. Every time Zoan looks like this, it is the most difficult to deal with, because at this time Zoan is like a madman who doesn't care about exchanging injuries. Search. Advertisement suddenly. Zoan disappeared without a trace after kicking his legs. Akiji raised his arms and shouted in a low voice. Ice blocks, ice walls. Boom. The ice wall was shattered directly. Zoan rushed to Akiji and shouted, come on, Marine Admiral, you have to show me stronger power. Little devil. Akiji also cursed angrily. Being provoked again and again, Akiji was finally furious. The two of them fought completely into a ball. The lightning-fast fight brought only bursts of frost and drops of blood. Go to hell. Zoan laughed cruelly. His hands on both sides seemed to be holding something sharp, stabbing straight at him, and the look was frightening. Ice knife. Akiji's eyes also flashed a fierce light. He didn't dodge, but stabbed the ice knife towards Zoan's chest. Puff. Snap. At the critical moment, Zoan rushed forward fiercely, and the ice knife pierced through his heart, but Zoan also got close to Akiji's body, stabbed Akiji's brain with 2 knives, and swung a long leg fiercely. Million tons. Crack. That was the sound of the leg breaking. P.S. I'm so sorry. Fox just got off the train, and I was still half an hour late despite rushing. Reading books every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 063. Go to hell. Zwakong's smile became even crazier, and he shouted almost violently. Puff. Akiji's arms were pierced through. Although they were cut off, there was an extra wound that was deep enough to see the bone, although there was no bleeding. Ahem. Zwakong spurted out a mouthful of blood, but a purple space immediately emerged with his palm. Room. Search. Zwakong appeared not far away, and immediately pressed his palm on the position of his heart and roared gloomily. Room life assembly. The purple light enveloped the heart again, and the injury recovered, while Zwakong's face became even paler. Puff. Even with Akiji's perseverance, he finally couldn't bear it and knelt on the ground. Akiji's face was extremely pale, even paler than Zwakong, and all the Marines became Wudong sect almost in an instant, and even Doberman fell into a state of distraction. Roar. Advertisement. Unfortunately, Doberman was distracted, but the teddy bear was not distracted. It slapped Doberman and sent him flying. Then it rode on Doberman and beat him up. Sugar. Where did you learn this trick? Although Monet felt his mouth twitch at Zwakong's action, he asked more desperately when he turned around. Every night, the master rode on my sister like this, so I learned it too. Little Sugar said very naively with a hint of weakness. How many people did Zwakong kill in North Blue? Doflamingo's subordinates, plus many people. At least 10,000 people were turned into dolls by Sugar, among which thousands were made into the doll knights, and the rest were all merged into this doll bear. So the doll bear has a very terrifying combat power, but at the same time, the doll bear is extremely difficult to control and requires a lot of mental energy. Monet and Hancock couldn't help but blush. Such a shameful thing was actually seen by a little girl. This little brat. He couldn't help but look at Akiji with a twitch in his mouth, thinking secretly. Hee hee. Zwakong's laughter seemed very gloomy and very cold. He seemed to be mocking and sarcastic and said, Akiji, how do you feel? You be asterisk. D. Akiji roared wildly, roaring and roaring. He struggled to get up, but waves of heart-wrenching pain came from his lower body, so Akiji still couldn't stand up straight. Such injuries were not particularly serious for him. Advertisement. As an admiral, Akiji had suffered a lot of injuries, but today's injuries really hit the man's psychology, and he was knocked down. Little brat, have you been kicked at the speed of light? Suddenly, a wretched voice came out, saying hypocritically, Zwakong frowned slightly, and a huge force swept his whole body in an instant, and he flew backwards. Boom! A deep pit was blown out of the ground, and a tall yellow figure emerged. Looking at Akiji's appearance, the battle-hardened warrior couldn't help but feel terrified. The man's second life was wasted just like that. This Kizaru is finally here. He breathed a sigh of relief and said easily. This time, in order to capture Zwakong, not only did they give up Tiger and dispatch Akiji, but they also dispatched Kizaru to ensure that there was no risk. What a terrifying little ghost. Akiji, you should have a good rest. Kizaru looked at Akiji's appearance. Even though he was used to mocking him, he couldn't help but whispered, I want to kill this little ghost myself. Akiji finally struggled to stand up and roared in a low voice. Search. Zwakong's figure suddenly appeared not far from the two of them, patted the frost on his body, and smiled faintly. Master. Monet was relieved and shouted nervously. You know, Kizaru's sudden appearance just now made Monet's heart completely lifted. Kizaru and Akiji are two admirals. Unless it is against the big pirates of New World, how could two admirals be dispatched? I feel so honored. 2 admirals were dispatched to deal with me alone. Zwakong looked at the two and suddenly laughed. There is no way. A kid like you is really amazing. If you continue to grow, New World can't add another emperor. Kizaru spread his hands and said helplessly. That's right. Zwakong admitted very bluntly. A kind of hockey, natural hockey, just like I am the only one. What Zwakong said is the fact. What a domineering kid. Kizaru looked terrible and suddenly squinted his eyes and said, Have you been kicked by the speed of light? Read books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 064. Light speed kick. The light drew a beautiful arc in the air and suddenly kicked Zwakong's head at a speed faster than the human eye. 500,000 tons. Bang! The sound of two collisions came, and Zoan took 3 steps back before stopping. He raised his head and smiled. What a terrible blow! It almost killed me in an instant. Are admirals all monsters? Feeling the terrifying recoil from his leg bones trembled slightly. Kizaru's cracked mouth looked even more obscene, and he didn't know whether it was a mockery or self-mockery. He raised his hands and said, what a monster boy. Same here. Monster Admiral, Zoan said with a cruel smile. Explode. Zoan's arm suddenly swelled up violently. Before Kizaru could move, Zoan's other hand suddenly grabbed Kizaru's calf and laughed crazily. Admiral, you are a guest. Don't leave so quickly. Boom! The violent explosion immediately swept around. A ray of light flashed, and Kizaru condensed a figure not far away, and said with a sigh, Monster Boy is really scary. Has the op fruit been developed to this extent? Is this really the ability of the op fruit? Crane frowned and thought. Crane was not sure. Akiji and Kizaru thought that Zoan had developed these abilities from the op fruit. Only Crane felt vaguely strange. Does the op fruit really have these abilities? Very weird. Deep in his heart, he had already branded Zoan with an extremely important list. He said loudly, Akiji, how is your body? Can you make a move? He Vice Admiral is fine. Akiji's complexion finally recovered at this time, but his legs still couldn't help shaking slightly, but he still said with murderous intent, Advertisement, is Admiral Akiji going to eat me? Zoan held his head and said with a sigh. Looking at this face, Akiji gnashed his teeth with hatred. I was actually crippled, and the side of me as a man was crippled. How could I accept this? Could it be that I would become a legendary species in the future? I am only in my 40s this year, and I am strong, so I am not without demand for women. By the way, Akiji, do you know eunuchs? They are the same as you, Zoan said teasingly with a long tone. Little devil. Room death cut. Zoan seized the opportunity of Akiji's gnashing teeth. With a hook of his hand, the purple space immediately expanded and launched a fierce and terrifying attack. Laser beam. Kizaru suddenly shot out a laser with one hand, and immediately knocked out the black blades at the moment they appeared. Even if Haki had the ability to defend the fruit ability, facing such a strong impact, it was still not so easy to defend. The power of Admiral is really terrible. Zoan still sighed. But Zoan suddenly rushed out in the smoke, and his target was Akiji. Zoan was of course the most clear about the weakness of his trick. Although the covering Haki could attack the Logia ability user, but the same covering Haki also formed a physical entity, so it could naturally be attacked. Little devil. Akiji showed a look of astonishment and said in disbelief, I never thought that Zoan would dare to take the initiative to attack in the siege of 2 admirals. Room explosion, gravity scalpel. Zoan lifted up with one hand, and the purple scalpel invisible to ordinary people immediately appeared and was thrown out directly. It was unknown whether Zoan had thrown it off target. Advertisement. The trick called scalpel was not aimed at Akiji's heart, but at Akiji's already disabled lower body. Light speed kick. Kizaru's reaction speed was naturally extremely fast, and a laser was kicked out directly. Zoan did not think about it, and immediately retreated. Boom. The scalpel was kicked and exploded, and the power mixed with the power of the light speed kick instantly formed a more terrifying power. Zoan looked at Akiji, who wanted to chase in midair, and waved his legs. Tempest kick explosion. Boom. The air blade thrown out by Zoan immediately formed a violent explosion the moment it touched Akiji, but Zoan was no longer interested. He jumped back and ran towards the pirate ship of Monet and others. Kid, where are you running? Kizaru shouted loudly as a mirror-like thing appeared in his palm. Boom. Ice pillars suddenly appeared on the ground. Akiji stood there in a mess, but the cooperation between the two had been very tacit. Kizaru turned into light and disappeared suddenly. 8-foot mirror. A channel of light was formed in the air, and Kizaru instantly appeared above Zoan's head and kicked him hard. Light speed kick. Kizaru, do you know? No matter how fast the speed of light is, it is probably far worse than teleportation. Zoan hooked his palm, and the man disappeared and appeared directly on the pirate ship. If I want to leave, no one can stop me. Zoan shook his finger at Kizaru and Akiji and said proudly, read books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 065. Boom. The light-speed kick caused another violent explosion. Kizaru walked out of the explosion, looked up at Zoan, who had appeared on the bow of the pirate ship, and said lazily with his hands in his pockets, "Little devil, are you going to run away? I finally came here. Well, it's really troublesome. Admiral, you came here in vain. I'm almost exhausted," Zoan said with a helpless smile. In a place where no one could see, Zoan's palm flipped slightly, and the extremely large purple space had covered the surrounding sea area, and almost all the warships were covered in it. "Don't think about running." Akiji soared into the sky and roared with gritted teeth. "It's really troublesome," Kizaru said helplessly. Although he said so, Akiji and Kizaru cooperated very well. The two of them suddenly attacked Zoan fiercely. Zoan did not dare to be careless. His strength was inferior to that of Admiral. He was in a situation where he surpassed Vice Admiral, but was not as good as Admiral. It was difficult for him to fight against one Admiral alone, let alone two at a time. If Akiji had joined forces with Kizaru without any damage, Zoan would have been taken down just now. There was still a big gap between him and Admiral. Akiji's injury was not serious, but the blow of breaking his leg was too great, so Akiji could not react for a while. Light speed kick, ice cube, brutal pheasant mouth. Kizaru and Akiji did not hold back at all this time. Even if it was the same trick, it burst out with more terrible power. Zoan obviously wanted to escape. If he could not be sure to catch him, then at least he should be kept here forever. Room. Advertisement search. Boom. As soon as Zoan's figure disappeared, the ice was immediately shattered, and Zoan's pirate ship appeared not far away in an instant. On the bow, Zoan's forehead was already covered with cold sweat. "Are you going to run away?" He turned his head and asked calmly without any intentional fluctuations. "Well, don't say that. I'm not an idiot. Two admirals are not something I can contend with now. My crew has not fully grown up yet, so of course we need a strategic retreat." Zoan laughed. He didn't feel ashamed at all. Zoan was a madman, a standard pirate, but Zoan was not an idiot. If he didn't leave, even though he knew he was no match for the two admirals, he would be an idiot. The teleportation of Op Fruit is very powerful, but how many times can you teleport such a powerful pirate ship? Kizaru is known as the fastest Logia Devil Fruit. He smiled faintly. She showed a confident smile. Facing Su Chu's powerful teleportation ability, he had already prepared. Otherwise, he would not have dispatched Kizaru. It seems that he Vice Admiral has already calculated it. Zoan looked at Kizaru and said helplessly, "Do you still think you can leave now?" His tone remained unchanged, still speaking calmly. "Of course. I said that no one can stop me if I want to leave, including the two admirals." Zoan opened his hands suddenly, and the purple light had already appeared in his hands to ultimate, and he laughed loudly. Not good. Akiji and Kizaru felt a little bad at the same time, but it was too late. Zoan's ability of the silence fruit faded, and everything emerged here. Room air explosion. Zoan clenched his fists suddenly and laughed wildly. "Go to hell." Advertisement boom. The violent explosion directly enveloped all the marine fleets. Akiji and Kizaru's faces were as ugly as if they had eaten a fly. They didn't expect that this guy who was originally judged to have lost all his physical strength actually had such a trick. Now the two are facing a very important choice. Search. Kizaru rushed towards Zoan in an instant, while Akiji rushed directly towards the warship of Tsuru Vice Admiral, clasped his hands and shouted, "Ice Age!" Boom. The explosion finally came, and Zoan looked at Kizaru floating in the air and attacked at the same time as Kizaru. Room explosion, 1,000,000 tons, gravity spear. Yashikani no Magatama. The yellow lasers covered the entire sea, and there were almost countless of them, and Zoan's attack turned into sharp spears, shrouded in black light and rushed straight towards Qingji. Boom boom. The violent explosion filled everyone's eyes. When the explosion dissipated, his eyebrows finally frowned. Zoan and his group had completely lost their traces. More importantly, Vice Admiral Doberman had died tragically in the explosion just now, providing Zoan with a copy point of 1. Marine triggered 20 warships, 2 Vice Admirals, and killed 1 Vice Admiral and injured 1 Admiral when 2 Admirals were destroyed. Zoan escaped when 15 warships were destroyed. He could already imagine the anger of the world government and celestial dragons that he would face next. He sighed helplessly. Have fun reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 066.
Master.
Monet held sugar and tried hard to control the pirate ship in the storm, but he couldn't help but ask nervously. Falling on the ground tiredly, Swakong waved his hand. His face was unnaturally pale and whispered, "It's okay. It's nothing serious, damn Marine." Thinking of Marine's attack, Swakong showed a crazy killing intent. Swakong is not an arrogant person. When he decided to fight, he had already planned the way back. Otherwise, wouldn't he be pushing himself into the fire pit? Becoming stronger is the most suitable battle with the strong, and Marine Admiral is one of the most suitable goals. But if you are not careful, you will stay forever. Tired, tired, tired. The three Hancock sisters were out of breath and wailed.
Ha ha ha.
Swakong looked at Hancock and suddenly laughed. He stretched out his hand and stopped Hancock in his arms, and kissed her delicate pink lips without hesitation, and it took a long time to separate. "You bad man. It's time to do this kind of thing." Although Hancock was shy, he did not resist. In fact, he did not have the strength to resist. He just refuted physically. "Haven't you heard that men and women working together are not tired?" Swakong said with a mouthful of twisted reasoning. "Master, really?" Monet rolled his eyes, but then he was relieved and said helplessly. Monet just looked at Hancock being teased by Swakong with interest. As for jealousy, he was not. "But Master, this time Marine sent such a large lineup and failed. Will it happen next time?" Monet asked with a little worry. "It's not whether it will happen, but I will never give them such an opportunity again." Swakong hugged the beauty in his arms tightly and said firmly. Swakong is confident that he can deal with an admiral. Even if he can't kill him, he can definitely retreat unscathed, but facing two admirals is not possible. This is definitely not acceptable to Swakong. The devil should stand on top of everyone, not be hunted down by others. Advertisement Marine's repeated behavior really annoyed Swakong, so I'll give you some gifts. The plan needs to be put on the agenda. Swakong suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky, whispering.
Pop.
The exquisitely carved table was smashed by a big hand. Sengoku was so angry that his beard stood up, and he roared, 2 admirals? 2 elite vice-admirals? 20 warships? Such a lineup let that kid escape, and destroyed 15 warships, and Doberman was killed? Okay. Sengoku, calm down. You know the ability of that kid. The number of people is useless. Although Garp was not in tune, he still didn't want his old friend to be so angry, and the persuasion said, "Hey." Sengoku sat down with a helpless sigh. Of course, he knew that after Swakong's op fruit was combined with the boom boom fruit, the number of people was simply a joke. Even if there were 100,000 people, as long as they entered the other party's sphere of influence, wouldn't it be a matter of a bomb? So facing Swakong, the human wave tactics are useless. This kid really gives me the feeling of Whitebeard when he was young. He held his chin with both hands and said with a very solemn face. The room became extremely quiet for a while. Sengoku, Garp, Zephyr, Akiji, Kizaru, and he can be said to represent the highest strength of the new and old Marines, but they were still silent when that name was mentioned. No matter what, this kid must be arrested immediately. The 5 elders and celestial dragons are becoming more and more dissatisfied. Sengoku rubbed his eyebrows and said helplessly with pressure, "I'll go." Zephyr's mind was very complicated, and he finally stood up and said firmly, "Zephyr." Advertisement looking at Zephyr's firm look, Sengoku, Garp, and he were moved. They all lowered their heads with a little guilt. Marino, this old Marine too much. "Okay, Zephyr, then you can go. Remember, don't force yourself." Sengoku, who was fierce, finally said in a low voice to his old friend, "I'm not that old yet." Zephyr grinned and said proudly. Although Zephyr, who had both arms intact, suffered a setback, the previous Supreme Admiral of Marine was no joke. He was the man who truly stood at the top of the sea with hockey. Dad, the bounty on that kid has increased again, and Marine's evaluation of him." Phoenix Marco, the captain of the first team of the Whitebeard pirate ship, hurriedly ran to Whitebeard with the bounty and said quickly, "Huh." Whitebeard, who was known as the strongest man in the sea, picked up the bounty and laughed loudly. The terrifying hockey shook the world and the sea. "Gulala. Marine, these guys are really annoying. But since you gave him such a title, Laozi needs to verify it himself." Whitebeard stood up, casually hockeyed the big Naginata beside him and laughed. "Devil's Wakong. Reward 500 million berries. The op fruit ability can escape from the hands of 2 admirals, and has the power that is no less than the young Whitebeard, the strongest man in the sea, like Whitebeard too. And this news also shocked the sea. Reading is fun every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 067. Master, this is the latest bounty order, and you are actually called Whitebeard too. Monet ran over with the bounty order in a hurry and said hurriedly. Ah. Zhuokong, who was training, raised his head and took the bounty order casually. When Zhuokong saw the words on it, his face immediately turned cold and said disdainfully, Marine is really good at calculating. This is equivalent to pushing me towards the hostile direction of the sea. Master, what should I do? Monet asked anxiously immediately. Monet is very smart. He immediately understood the whole story of the matter. Marine is completely killing someone with a borrowed knife. This title was given by Marine, and Whitebeard was given by the world. Naturally, all kinds of people will come to kill Zhuokong and verify this statement. More importantly, Zhuokong can be said to have made enemies with the Whitebeard pirates the moment he got this title, unless Zhuokong joined the Whitebeard pirates. Unfortunately, Zhuokong is not someone who is willing to surrender to others. I have to admit that Marine's move is really good. Zhuokong smiled and praised. It's already like this. You can still laugh? Hancock walked towards Zhuokong with a sexy step and said as he walked, Well, you are getting more and more mature recently. Zhuokong looked at Hancock and praised with interest. Advertisement you. Even if you praise me, I won't be happy. Hancock covered his face with a little shyness and said stutteringly. Zhuokong and Monet were both full of black lines, and they really wanted to yell. Big sister, you are not at Sundra. You are a queen. Don't make such a fuss, okay? But Zhuokong suddenly looked at Monet and Hancock with a sly smile, grinning, and said wickedly, You two have developed better and better recently. It seems that it's all my credit. Humph. The two women snorted at the same time and left quickly. Master. Xiao Shatang suddenly ran over and said a little nervously, What's wrong? Zhuokong sat down cross-legged, looking at Sandang strangely. Master, my little bear is broken. I want to go to town to find materials to repair it. Sandang raised the little bear in his arms, and sure enough, there were wounds of various sizes in many places, and said with a sad face. Zhuokong rubbed Sandang's little head. After all, he was competing with Marine Vice Admiral like Doberman. Sandang was at the same level with the special fruit ability, plus the formation of Monet and Hancock, which suppressed the Marine Vice Admiral. Otherwise, do you really think that Marine Vice Admiral can be defeated so easily? Go. When choosing materials, don't choose those that are weak at first glance. Find stronger materials so that the dolls made are powerful, Zhuokong said to Sandang in a very inhumane way. Yeah. Sandang nodded obediently and immediately jumped away. Advertisement. It is obvious that Sandang's worldview has been completely destroyed by Zhuokong. Hey. After sending Little Sugar away, Zhuokong started training again, but he began to think about something secretly. Monet's fruit development is still too weak. Although Sugar's childish fruit is heaven-defying, it is very related to the quality of the materials. Zhuokong frowned and began to ponder, thinking secretly in his heart. Monet assembled 10,000 teddy bears to be comparable to Vice Admiral like Doberman. If 10 Vice Admirals were assembled together, what would the effect be? What about 10 Admirals? What about 4 Emperors? This is a very interesting question in itself. If this is really done, Sugar's strength will be extremely improved. Master, the ship has docked. Let's go down to purchase. Monet shouted to Zhuokong. Go. By the way, bring me some good wine, Zhuokong said without raising his head. Got it. Drunkard master, Monet muttered, saying cutely. The 5 of them left, and suddenly Zhuokong was the only one left on the boat. But this is obviously not displayed. Zhuokong couldn't help but frown, rubbing his eyebrows and said helplessly. Zhuokong needs copy points and devil fruit, and basically the strong ones have these too. Although the system stipulates that you can get copy points by defeating the strong, Zhuokong has not figured out how to defeat them. Is it to cripple them, or to destroy them? When Zhuokong was thinking about it, suddenly the 3 Hancock sisters ran back in a hurry, and Hancock shouted while running, Kong, guess what good things we found? Good things? Zhuokong raised his head and murmured strangely, but he immediately found the problem. Hancock seemed to become more charming and beautiful. This kind of beauty was very strange, but very natural, and it seemed that people could not help but indulge in it. It can't be. Zwakong thought in amazement. If this is true, then this luck is 2F ***** ed, right? Why don't I have this kind of luck? Have fun reading during the National Day. Top up 100 and get 500 VIP points. Top up now. Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 068. Without waiting for Hancock to speak again, Zwakong blurted out in astonishment. Don't tell me that you guys went out for a while and found a devil fruit to eat by yourself? Kong, how did you know? Hancock tilted his head and said strangely. The strange beauty made Zwakong couldn't help but be slightly obsessed, and then shook his head, and the feeling disappeared in an instant. Isn't it so pitiful? Zwakong really wanted to cry without tears, and sighed in grief in his heart. What is this? I tried so hard to get devil fruit, but I couldn't find one. But they picked up devil fruit for nothing. Monet and Sugar picked up 3 in the cave. The 3 Hancock sisters were even more ridiculous. They clearly agreed to go for a walk in the town, but they actually got 3 devil fruits directly. Hey! With a helpless sigh, Zwakong felt that his luck was negative. Tell me, how did you get the devil fruit? Zwakong asked helplessly. How did you get it? Hancock blinked and said cutely. Actually, there was a stinky man selling fruits. They didn't know devil fruit, so I bought them. There were 3 in total. Although I didn't know what devil fruit they were, from the appearance, they should be 1 Paramecia and 2 Zoans. Listening to Hancock's matter-of-fact words, Zwakong almost spit out a mouthful of blood. What the hell is this? And then you ate it? Zwakong looked at the other 2 women who had not changed at all except Hancock, and asked curiously. Advertisement, of course. Hancock immediately said excitedly. And, listening to Hancock's long tone, Zwakong also sat up curiously. Suddenly, Hancock jumped up and blew a kiss to Zwakong, and a pink heart-shaped substance immediately flew out and flew towards Zwakong. Captive kiss. Idiot. What the hell is a captive kiss? Zwakong rolled his eyes and complained helplessly.
Crack.
Zwakong crushed the pink heart with a slap, and said helplessly, Hancock, you dare to challenge me after eating the devil fruit? Don't you want to get out of bed tomorrow? Kong. I will order you from today. I will make you my captive. Hancock stood in front of Zwakong proudly, as if Hockey said, Little girl, can you say that again? Zwakong stood up with a smile, lifted Hancock's delicate face with one hand, and said evilly, Hancock is beautiful, and after eating the sweet fruit, the whole person has a special temperament, which makes people involuntarily obsessed with Hancock, and even prefer to be obsessed with Hancock. Woo woo woo. It was obvious that although he was strong and proud, Hancock immediately retreated under Zwakong's gaze. With a sad face, he knocked on Zwakong's chest and said angrily, You bad guy, don't you know how to give in to me? Sonia and Marigold looked at each other, and the 2 women decided to talk nonsense. But what is going on in this situation? Sister, we are prisoners, okay? And is it really okay for you to be so close to the enemy? The 2 women had no idea what they should say, but just complained wildly in their hearts. Okay. What a stupid girl. You want to become the pirate queen like this. Just go to bed. Zwakong helplessly hugged Hancock in his arms, gently comforting but complaining. Hancock said firmly after a coquettish hum, I will definitely become the pirate queen, and then conquer you, a man, and make you submit to me forever. Hey. Are you really a man to talk like this as a girl? Zwakong finally couldn't stand it and complained helplessly. Advertisement, Hancock raised her head proudly after another coquettish hum, as if looking down at Zwakong at a 45-degree angle. Stinky girl, are you looking for death? I am a hot-tempered person. Zwakong immediately put Hancock across his legs amid Hancock's screams and smiled gloomily. You. What are you going to do? Hancock said in fear like a little kitten. What are you doing? Zwakong said with a wicked smile. Zwakong held Hancock's 2 hands with one hand, and lifted Hancock's Chong-Sam-like custom-made clothes with the other hand, revealing flawless white jade legs and black panties. Let me go. Kong. I was wrong. Hancock threw himself at him, begging. Do you have any objections? Zwakong raised his head slightly, showing an evil smile, and asked in a low voice. Sister. Hancock called softly. Sonia and Marigold looked at Hancock, then looked at Zwakong, and finally turned their heads very straightforwardly, saying very firmly, We didn't see anything, Lord Kong. You are free to do whatever you want. Yeah. Zwakong took off Hancock's black panties and patted them directly with his big hand. Ah, have fun reading every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 069. Sander Sonia and Marigold, hearing Hancock's cry for help, hurried to the side to serve as a background. But why did the sound become more and more strange? At the beginning, Hancock was indeed begging for mercy. Then he started to say harsh words, and finally he began to pant and moan. What happened? Monet jumped onto the boat with sugar in his arms, threw the oversized supplies aside, and immediately said strangely when he saw the situation on the boat. Zwakong sat on the ground with a wicked smile and hugged Hancock, while Hancock lay in Zwakong's arms, with tears still on his face, looking like he was completely played. Master, what did you do just now? Monet asked cautiously, and he took 2 steps back, as if he was afraid that Zwakong would rush up and him. Idiot. Zwakong looked at Monet and cursed helplessly. So, you bought devil fruit at the fruit stand when you went out? Monet looked at the 3 girls in astonishment and stood up from the table and said in surprise. Humph. Hancock snorted. What a fuss. How can you understand my luck? Humph. Monet snorted unyieldingly and said proudly. It's just 3 devil fruits, but my sister and I picked up 3 devil fruits, and Logia and top-level Paramecia are much better than 1 Paramecia and 2 Zoans. Advertisement you. Looking at Monet's noble appearance, Hancock was immediately speechless with anger, and pointed at Monet for a long time without saying you. Tian fruit can also be regarded as a good devil fruit, but it is much worse than Tungtsu fruit, and even worse than Logia, and the 2 sisters are Zoan. So naturally it is much worse. Okay, stop arguing. What are the devil fruit abilities of you 2 girls? Zwakong stopped the quarrel between Monet and Hancock, and asked Sander Sonia and Marigold strangely. Not only Zwakong, but also Hancock and Monet were very curious. The little loli, Sandang, put down the spoon in her hand and looked at the 2 girls. If it is according to the plot, they should have eaten the snake fruit, cobra form, and snake fruit, python form. Zwakong thought in his heart. We don't know either, Sander Sonia said in a panic, feeling cold when being looked at by 4 people. It's easy to not know. Just try it out. Don't tell me you 2 can't do it. Zwakong narrowed his eyes and said threateningly. Lord Kong, there must be no problem. The 2 girls stood up firmly immediately. After recuperation, their slender bodies looked much hotter. And unlike the original story where they ate hot pot to learn sumo, the 2 girls kept their figures very well under Zwakong's training. Although their appearance was not as good as their sisters, it was still pretty good. Roar. Do it as you think. Marigold's face suddenly became extremely ugly. The whole body began to struggle violently. Soon, in the eyes of everyone, she turned into a snake. The whole body was green, but the weird thing was that it was not like an ordinary snake. Instead, it had 2 small claws. The head was not like a simple snake, but more like a combination of a lizard and a snake. What a weird snake. Monet said strangely. This is not an ordinary snake. Zwakong looked at Marigold's appearance, began to ponder, and asked solemnly. Marigold, is there something special about you that allows you to do that? Advertisement. I feel like I can never use up all the power in my body, and, as Marigold said this, she exerted her claws slightly, and a sound of music bursting out. Obviously, this was caused by the ultimate power. I see. Zwakong nodded and smiled interestingly. What? Hancock asked curiously. This is not an ordinary Zoan. It's a Zoan ancient species. Zwakong said with certainty. Ancient species. The people present were all shocked. Marigold's body began to twist and return to its original form, but before Zwakong could speak, Sander Sonia suddenly twisted her body and began to change. The whole person twisted violently and let out a roar, and a more desolate, ancient breath came out. This is... Zwakong looked at Sander Sonia and said interestingly, I didn't expect it to be another ancient species. The biggest difference between ordinary Zoan and ancient species is the breath, and the desolate ancient breath is absolutely correct. Snake fruit, ancient species, true foot snake form, snake fruit, ancient species, titan python form. These are definitely the 2 fruits. Zwakong said very firmly. Hancock immediately turned his head to look at Monet, and said proudly, My luck is not comparable to yours. Okay. Stop arguing, you 2. Monet has set the route, and next we will go to Sky Island, and we must get the Thunder Fruit, Zwakong said firmly. Have fun reading every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 070. I didn't expect it to be an ancient species. Although Hancock mocked Monet, he was also amazed in his heart. Hancock never dreamed that the 3 devil fruits he bought casually, the sweet fruits of Paramecia, were not weak fruits, and the 2 Zoans were actually ancient species. This is a rarer species than Logia. Of course, Hancock is not jealous. After all, they are his sisters. Sky Island, Hancock said in astonishment. But Zwakong's words surprised Hancock completely. Looking at Zwakong, he obviously did not believe in the existence of Sky Island. Humph, you don't have any knowledge at first glance. Sky Island is real. Monet snorted sarcastically, wrapping his hands around his chest to set off his plumpness. I don't care about the defeated general. Hancock glanced at Monet and said with disdain. You. As expected, this indifferent and disdainful attitude immediately made Monet slam the table. Zwakong immediately scolded coldly. You two are done. Yes, master.
Kong.
Monet and Hancock sat down obediently, while Sonia and Marigold, who had recovered, sat down obediently in their seats, eating peacefully, and the nameless flame must not burn them. Let's go. Zwakong stood up after dinner and said with a wicked smile. Before the 2 girls could react, Zwakong picked them up and carried them into their rooms. Soon, there were waves of exciting voices in the room. Well, master, sister and Sister Hancock are doing bad things again. Little Sand Sugar exclaimed very cutely. Okay, children can't know these things. Sonia hurriedly took Sand Sugar away and warned. Really? Advertisement. Early the next morning, Zwakong came out of the room refreshed, with a very comfortable smile. After the profound teaching last night, Hancock and Monet both surrendered obediently. Master Kong, I have something to ask. Sonia said hesitantly. Go ahead. Zwakong stopped training and said strangely. Master Kong, why do you want to teach us Marine 6 styles? We should be enemies, right? This time it was Marigold who came over and asked curiously. The 2 little girls sat beside Zwakong, not caring whether the deck was dirty or not. During this period, Zwakong began to train the 2 girls in Marine 6 styles, which made the 2 girls most curious. Do you really think we are enemies? Zwakong asked strangely. Kong, come and see if my new clothes are good-looking. Hancock suddenly ran over quickly, wearing a very gorgeous Chong Sam, and said shyly. Yeah. Zwakong nodded and said, Not bad, very good-looking. That's good. Hancock said happily. Then he looked at Monet provocatively and ran away happily. As soon as Zwakong turned around, the 2 girls immediately said together, Master Kong, we know. After that, the 2 girls ran to train obediently. They were not ungrateful people. Zwakong did not threaten them and taught them to train. The most important thing was that their eldest sister was kidnapped by others, so they should be obedient. More importantly, it is good to follow Zwakong. Zwakong is very protective of his shortcomings. It is said that it was because of Monet and Sucrose that the celestial dragons were killed. Master, according to legend, Sky Island should be above this sea area. Monet suddenly stopped the boat, ran over, and reported. Here. Zwakong looked at the sky and murmured. Kong, even if Sky Island really exists, how can we get up there? You know, Sky Island is above 10,000 meters in the sky. Or do we have to wait for the appearance of updrafts? Hancock also came over and asked curiously. Advertisement after all, no matter how you look at it. Zwakong doesn't look like the kind of person who will wait for updrafts to appear. Waiting for the updraft to appear, do you think I'm that kind of person? Zwakong curled his lips and said strangely. No. Asterisk 5 the 5 girls, including Xiao Shatang, said in unison. Okay, let's have a good rest. Monet, go to the nearby sea and capture 100 or so people. Remember to bring strong men. Zwakong said with excitement in his eyes. It was obvious that Monet had thought wrongly, and looked at Zwakong sadly and said, Master, are you going to abandon me? But I just think Hancock is better than men. What are you thinking, you little girl? I want to go to Sky Island through physical exchange. Zwakong immediately shouted angrily. Yes. Monet hurried down, and the others also began to pack up what they should pack. Room. Early in the morning of the second day, Zwakong suddenly took action. The pirate ship disappeared out of thin air and appeared dozens of meters above the sky when it appeared again. However, before the pirate ship fell, Zwakong hooked his fingers again.
Room.
After 10 consecutive rooms, Zoan used the teleportation ability of the Audiobook fruit to raise the pirate ship hundreds of meters out of thin air. But at this moment, Zoan was already sweating profusely. Room Physical Exchange. With a hook of Zoan's palm, 7 or 8 pirates tied up around him immediately fell to the ground. Physical exchange requires the consent of both parties, but unfortunately, the heart is in Zoan's hand, and they can't disagree. After replenishing enough physical strength, Zoan immediately soared into the sky again, and repeated it over and over again until almost all the pirates on the ship fell down. Finally, the pirate ship broke through the clouds and entered a new world. Arrived at Sky Island. Read books every day during the National Day. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time. October 1st to October 7th. 071. Bang. With Zoan's last room, the pirate ship crashed directly into the cloud-like ocean. It was obviously made of clouds, but the pirate ship did not fall down, but floated on it. Is this Sky Island? It's so beautiful. Monet looked around curiously, especially the cloud-like ocean, and said in a little girl's voice in surprise, "Humph, women like you like to make a fuss," Hancock said proudly with his head raised. However, from the slightly sideways eyes, it can be seen that Hancock is obviously very curious about such a situation. In the Legend of the Blue Sea, Sky Island is a legendary place, and now suddenly came to such a legendary place. Although Hancock's personality has become more and more like the future empress after eating the sweet fruit, he still retains the curiosity of a little girl. If you have the ability, don't look at it. Monet curled his lips and said disdainfully. You. Hancock glared at Monet. Room Physical Exchange. Zoan hooked his fingers again, and the last few pirates on the ship fell to the ground completely. After recovering, he said calmly, "Little Sugar, they are handed over to you. Use them to form your knights." Yes.
Yes.
Little Sugar immediately jumped over and turned them into dolls one by one, and then compressed them to form a new doll knight. During this period, Zoan destroyed 3 or 4 marine branches out of revenge, which made everyone on the sea look sideways. They didn't expect that there would be people who dared to challenge the world government. Those elite marines were integrated into the doll bears by Sugar, and the rest were turned into the knights. Now Sugar's knights have expanded to 200 people, and the quality has also improved. This should be Sky Island. Zoan looked around, rubbing his chin, but frowned slightly. Advertisement. Zoan frowned and looked around. To be honest, Sky Island was a completely unknown area. Zoan was completely confused now. Where is this? Master, what are you going to do next? Monet floated around and ran back, saying strangely, "Next." Zoan was just about to answer, but suddenly his mouth curled up and he smiled evilly. "The ready-made guide is here. Search." At this time, several people actually floated over on special clouds, and they looked ferocious, and they didn't look like good people. "Hey, you low-level Blue Sea people, pay 10 billion IQ immediately, otherwise you will be wanted by our kingdom. I think these women should be able to sell one." One of them said ferociously. Boss, that low-level Blue Sea woman is too beautiful, not as good as us." Another soldier said evilly. "I think it's okay." "Yeah, boss, let's have some fun." "That's right, let's have some fun." Hearing these dirty words, Hancock's face immediately turned cold as ice. Before he could make a move, Zoan suddenly disappeared. "What were you talking about just now?" Zoan said in a very gloomy voice, pinching the soldier's throat with one hand. "Blue Sea people, you were looking for?" Even though he had been caught, the soldier still shouted wildly.
Crack.
Zoan directly broke his neck and threw it into the mouth of Sea Kings who had already stuck his head out. He sneered more ferociously and said, "Do you know something more terrible than death? Advertisement, let me tell you. That is worse than death. Room Heart Cutting." Bang. The heart suddenly fell into Zoan's hand and was crushed fiercely. The 5 soldiers showed extremely painful expressions at the same time and wailed violently. Room Life Assembly. It was hooked again, and the heart was assembled. After only 4 times in a row, these soldiers were already foaming at the mouth and mentally collapsed. Remember, in the next life, don't mess with people you shouldn't mess with. You are the only one left. Zoan set his eyes on the last soldier and asked coldly.
Plop.
The only remaining soldier knelt directly on the ground, trembling, and said, "My lord, no. Ancestor, I beg you, let me go. I simply. Very good. Just understand what should be done." Zoan nodded with satisfaction, still speaking gloomily. Where is this? My lord, this is the entry and exit of the kingdom of Burka. Everyone who enters and leaves here must pay a fee of 10 billion IQ, the soldier said in horror. Burka? Zoan frowned slightly, muttering the name, which seemed very familiar, but he forgot where this place was. Do you know who Enel is? Zoan asked coldly. Have fun reading books every day during the national day. Top up 100 and get 500 VIP points. Top up now, activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 072. That guy is a demon, a monster, a tyrant. As soon as the name was mentioned, the remaining soldier immediately gritted his teeth and said with resentment. Interesting. It seems that Enel has obtained the power of Thunder Fruit, Zoan said with interest, dragging his chin. Room. With a hook of his palm, Zoan instantly brought the soldiers back to the ship, threw the soldiers aside, and continued to ask. I thought you were in the same group with Enel, but now it seems that you belong to other forces? Zoan sat down and leaned on Hancock's arms behind him, asking with interest. I am loyal to the real king of the kingdom of Burka, His Majesty Ars. When the name was mentioned, the panicked soldier showed an admiring look and said very respectfully, Oh, brothers, look what I found. It's the Blue Sea people. Go, brothers, kill the men and take the women away. Zoan pondered for a while, and his fingers moved slightly. The purple space expanded rapidly and surrounded the dozen arrogant soldiers who rushed out from nowhere. Room air bomb. Boom. The violent explosion formed beautiful fireworks, which exploded in front of the soldiers. In their horrified eyes, all the soldiers became minced meat, and there was no body left. Advertisement Gudong. He swallowed deeply, and he felt the real fear at this moment. Okay, stop talking nonsense. Take me to find your king, Zoan suddenly said. The soldier obviously didn't react and said in astonishment, Do you have any objections? Zoan said with murderous intent. No, sir. The soldier immediately stood up in a panic, pointed in a direction, and said hurriedly, Sir, since the demon Enel robbed the Burka kingdom through demonic means, our great king Ars has been hiding on a cloud island near Burka. Zoan waved his hand impatiently and said, Don't talk nonsense, lead the way. In the eyes full of murderous intent, the soldier shut his mouth obediently, pointed the direction, and Monet manipulated the pirate ship to rush in that direction. Why is it so slow to let Odin's group of bastards collect some fees? A man who looked to be in his 30s was sitting on the cloud island and cursing. He said so, but there was a trace of worry in his eyes. He was defeated by Enel, and the entire kingdom was violently seized. In the end, only these hundreds of people were willing to follow him away. Even if others knew that they were just afraid of the power of Enel's demon, betrayal is betrayal. King Ars, a pirate ship of the Blue Sea people, is coming, the vigilant guards reported nervously after discovering Zoan and his group. Not good. Ars stood up immediately and shouted loudly. Be prepared for battle. The low-level pirates of the Blue Sea people are coming. Low-level pirates? Are you referring to me? Suddenly a faint voice came, and Zoan, who was holding the soldier's throat with one hand, appeared in front of Ars and said coldly, You. Before Ars could speak, he was punched in the abdomen by Zoan. Even though Zoan did not use any fruit ability, or even hockey, the power of Zoan's punch still formed a shock wave-like impact, and the sea of clouds behind Ars was shattered.
Wow.
Spitting blood and kneeling on the ground, Ars looked hideous, and struggled violently several times to stand up, but in the end he could only lie weakly at Zoan's feet.
Protect the king.
Wind blowing snow. Advertisement, kiss the gun. The blizzard was flying, and pink arrows shot out from the pink peach heart. The snowflakes pierced through the human body and brought blood flowers, while the pink arrows brought up stone statues. Roar. This was a roar like a beast. Two ferocious giant snakes soared into the sky, roaring wildly, and quickly swept the guards who had surrounded here. King Ars, right? I hope to make a deal with you, and you'd better agree. Otherwise, I believe your family will definitely have someone willing to cooperate. Zoan grabbed Ars's head and lifted it in front of him, chuckling. What deal do you want to make? Ars asked with a pale face and a trembling voice. Although he hated to skin Zoan and eat his flesh and his heart, he had to pretend to be humble on the surface. This is what a conspirator should do. Yes, it seems that you are very satisfied with me. Let your people stop. Zoan continued. Soon, under the command of Ars, only a few moments later, Only about 20 guards were left, and they hurriedly surrounded him. Zoan then said, I will help you drive Enel out of the palace, and all you need to do is spend the resources of the entire country to build a pirate ship for me with Sky Island's unique shell. That's not it. Ars refused without thinking. Boom. A deep pit appeared on the cloud surface. Zoan clenched his fist with one hand and smiled evilly. You are not qualified to resist. You must agree to this deal. P.S. Dear friends, the last public chapter will be available tomorrow morning. I hope you can give me a first order and support me. Have fun reading every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time. October 1st to October 7th. 073. I know. Ars, who was completely frightened by Zoan's terrifying power, said with a trembling voice. Very good. Zoan nodded with satisfaction and smiled. I believe you are not the only one in the royal family. I believe they must be very interested in the position of king. If you don't want it, don't worry, sir. Don't worry, there will be no problem. Ars nodded hurriedly without thinking. Take me to the palace tomorrow. Zoan left such a sentence and disappeared in the center of Yundao. 113. As soon as Zoan left, Ars fell to the ground, sweating uncontrollably, shaking with fear. Facing Zoan's 537, terrifying murderous intent, he, a pampered king, was lucky to be able to hold on until now. My lord, do we really have to spend the country's assets to build him? The captain of the guard said cautiously. What else can we do? Ars said helplessly in fear. But in a place where no one could see, Al's eyes were flashing with ferocious eyes. He would never become a puppet manipulated by someone. Master! As soon as he stepped onto the pirate ship, he heard Monet's shout. What's wrong? Zoan turned around and looked at Monet, saying strangely, Master, that ALS is obviously not sincere. Why do you still want to help him get back the position of king? Monet asked curiously. 09. Hancock put his hands around his chest to make his fullness look huge, and walked over with a proud step. Sander, Sonia, and Marigold behind him were completely like I am, just a follower. Don't pay attention to me. Hancock snorted coquettishly and said proudly, You are really a stupid woman. Let me tell you what I plan to do. Advertisement, oh. Then you tell me? Monet greeted Hancock fearlessly, and also said with his hands around his chest. Perhaps to boost his momentum, he also pulled Sucrose behind him. Seeing the two women on the verge of a fight, Zoan just shook his head with a smile. With a flick of his hand, a bottle of fine wine fell into his hand. He leaned on the sofa on the deck, drank the fine wine, and looked at the beauty. I'm not familiar with Sky Island at all, so I naturally need a guide. By then, even if Ars returns, I can completely change a king with my strength. Hancock raised his head proudly and said with disdain. Really? Monet knew that Hancock was telling the truth, but he couldn't help but retort. What I said is naturally the truth, because I'm so beautiful. Hancock was extremely narcissistic and said proudly with his head shaken. Humph. With a hum, Monet left with Sucrose. If you lose a game, you can save it and get it back next time. These two girls. Zoan sighed helplessly, shaking his head. The next morning, Ars led the remaining 21 members of the guard team to board Zoan's pirate ship and pointed the direction to the Burka Kingdom. My lord, this is the Burka Kingdom. Pointing to the larger cloud island in front, Ars said very humbly. Is this Burka? Zoan narrowed his eyes and looked at the Burka Kingdom, saying with interest. Zoan was actually very puzzled. How did this world develop? Why are the so-called countries actually islands? Song. But these islands are just a little bit more dramatic. Of course, I just sighed. What does this have to do with me? That's right, my lord. At the top of the Burka Kingdom is the location of the royal palace, and the demon Enel should live there. Ars pointed to the luxurious palace made of white clouds at the top and said hatefully. The entire Burka is almost made of clouds, and the cloud bricks formed by the compression of clouds form such houses made of clouds. My lord, I have a request. Ars suddenly knelt on the ground and said excitedly. What is it? Zoan looked at the Burka Kingdom getting closer and closer and asked without turning his head. 04151232 Felu 180043521. Advertisement, can you let the civilians on the island go? They are all innocent. They are all enslaved by the tyrant Enel. Ars said nervously. The trembling but hopeful look made him look like a king who sacrificed himself for the country and fed the devil. Your behavior really makes me feel sick. Hancock walked out of the cabin and said disdainfully, "I." Ars lowered his head in a hurry. He wanted to refute just now, but he didn't dare to say a word. Hancock was too beautiful. He was afraid that he would have any other emotions, and then he would be dead. Interesting. Zwakong smiled mysteriously. Looking at Ars's appearance, Zwakong's heart became colder. It seemed that this king had his own little tricks. If that was the case, it would be better to change to an obedient one, since we are here. Next, Zwakong looked at the Burka Palace in the distance and asked Monet to stop the pirate ship and ordered, "Everyone stay on the pirate ship." "Yes, master." Monet just lowered his head, and Zwakong had disappeared, but Monet said not very respectfully, "Sandersonia, Marigold, go and throw away the garbage on the ship 5.2. I am upset." Hancock waved his hand, pointing at Ars and the others, and said with disgust, "Yes, sister." The two women immediately walked up, and although their slender bodies burst out with terrible power, they directly threw these elite troops and the king down one by one like chickens. The violent explosion resounded in everyone's ears. At some point, a deep pit suddenly appeared in the cloud walls. 10 shadow-like figures disappeared without a trace. Ma. Blood dripped onto the ground. Zwakong shook his hand, threw the guard in his hand out, looked at the palace so close, tilted his head and said, "This is the defense of the palace. It's so weak that it makes people feel boring." 074. With blood everywhere, Zwakong came to the front of the palace. As for holding back, Zwakong had no habit of holding back. Since you were standing in front of him, you were his enemy. No matter who you were, you had to die. Boom! Zwakong threw a punch, and the palace gate immediately endured an extremely terrifying sense of oppression. It was shattered into powder at the moment of being shattered. "Isn't the quality of your palace too low?" Zwakong strode into the palace and said to the man directly above. The naked upper body man was leaning on the throne belonging to the king. His earlobes were longer than those of the Buddhas. He carried 4 small drums with magatama on his back, and a golden stick stood beside him. He was eating an apple. Seeing Zwakong coming in front of him, Enel yawned lazily and said, I can't do anything. After all, this place was not built by me. Those rubbish built it like this." 25. It seems that you are already impatient with this place? Zwakong did not intend to be an enemy at all, but said it as if chatting. "Yes. If a blue sea person like you did not come, I would have been ready to destroy the entire Burka." Enel picked his ears and said lazily, "Inazuma." Suddenly, the laziness in Enel's eyes disappeared without a trace, leaving only cruelty. His arm suddenly turned into thunder, and the straight thunder passed through instantly, and the speed was no less than Kazara's attack speed. Thunder Fruit is known as the most powerful Logia devil fruit. It is comparable to sparkling fruit in terms of speed and stronger attack power. Fit. Enel's ferocity turned into astonishment. He found that his tried-and-true tricks were ineffective on Zwakong. The position of the moon. The chest was covered with black for some reason, and his thunder could not penetrate the black layer. "Hey, is this all you can do as a self-proclaimed king?" Zwakong crushed the lightning and mocked. "Blue Sea Man, it seems you have some skills." Enel finally stood up and laughed with his hands open. "A unspecified currency, A with circumflex, A with circumflex." Suddenly Enel stopped and said cruelly, "But that's it, go to hell. God's judgment." Enel's wrist suddenly turned into thunder and rushed into the sky, and a moment later Zwakong's. Zhang reminded, "Is it here?" Looking up at the air, Zwakong said interestingly, "Advertisement, Teeb the palace was destroyed in an instant," and Enel laughed wildly. That's all. That's all. The Blue Sea people are indeed a lowly race, and they won't cooperate with me as an enemy. I want to be a man who is a god." Hey, your words are annoying." Zwakong's voice suddenly came, and he seemed to be very helpless. "What?" Enel lowered his head in astonishment, looking at Zwakong, who had come to him without knowing when, and said in horror, "Fit." Zwakong's punch hit Enel's chest. The 500,000-ton pressure, the armed color hockey, and the terrifying system, all merged into one, forming a devastating punch. Wow! A mouthful of blood spurted out, and Enel, who was flying backwards, felt that his heart was about to stop beating. He stretched out his hand and pressed it on his heart with trembling hands, and shouted, "Electrotherapy!" Thump, thump, thump. Finally, the heart beat violently again, and suddenly turned into lightning in the air. Enel floated in the air and shouted, "Blue Sea Man, you angered me. I'm going to kill you. This is the only way to have fun. With his mouth wide open, Zwakong laughed excitedly. Room air explosion. Advertisement taking the lead. Zwakong hooked his palm, and a violent explosion immediately occurred at the position where Enel was. The lightning gathered again, and in the center of the explosion, Enel's body completely disintegrated into thunder. He aimed both hands at Zwakong at the same time and shouted, "Die! Double, God's judgment!" Boom! Two thunders that formed a shock wave blasted out. Zwakong shook his head slightly and said helplessly, "Such an attack is too boring. Pa!" Zwakong simply took a step and easily avoided the two thunder attacks. Such an attack without any preparation and going straight back and forth, in Zwakong's observation haki, no matter how fast it was just a target-like attack. Ars looked at everything happening in front of him in horror and said in fear. Two long traces were drawn across the ground, and even the two traces were still there from a long distance. This is the real horror of Thunder Fruit, Zwakong said in amazement as he looked at the huge, cracked fruit. Room, Death Cut 993. Zwakong suddenly said strangely, with his mouth curled up, almost seeing Enel's death. Compared with Admiral Masters like Akiji and Kizaru, Enel is still too young and too weak. Idiot. Do you think I really didn't take precautions? My heartnet can cover the entire Burka Kingdom, and I have seen through your tricks long ago. Enel suddenly collapsed into thunder at the moment of the attack, and laughed loudly after reorganizing. 1. Zwakong's face was slightly solemn, thinking secretly, this guy actually knows how to hide his strength? I didn't expect that the combination of Thunder Fruit and Observation Haki would allow him to see through the ability of the Silence Fruit. That was something that even Admiral couldn't see through completely and could only feel at the last moment. Of course, this had a lot to do with Admiral's main development of fruit abilities. Haha, I have such a godlike ability. I am God. Yes, I am Boo. Enel soared into the sky with his hands open, making a wild sound, as if he was a god looking down at the earth, and said arrogantly, "Idiot." Zwakong cursed. Room Gravity Scalpel. 50 million volts, Destruction of God. 075. The purple scalpel was covered with black light, and it staggered in the air, leaving a dark mark. The lightning surged, the sound shook the sky. Enel clasped his hands together, and the judgment of God gathered into one. The color of the thunder slightly changed to black, forming a terrifying shock wave-like attack boom. The palace, which had become a ruin under Enel's judgment of God, was finally completely shattered, and even the palace that was higher than ordinary people was completely flattened. Unspecified currency A, 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 A unspecified currency A, unspecified currency A, specified currency. Enel laughed wildly and laughed. Blue Sea people, now you know it? God is invincible. The sky was filled with smoke, and in the induction of Enel's heart network, Zwakong's figure had disappeared without a trace. What are you talking about, idiot? Zwakong's voice suddenly came from behind, and he seemed to be very helpless. How is this? Enel said in astonishment. Pa, before he turned his head, Zwakong punched him hard, and the scalpel in his other hand appeared again, condensing black haki and piercing Ailu's chest. A long shadow was drawn above the sea of clouds. Enel raised his head with difficulty, struggled to stand up in the air, floated up again and roared, "UB asterisk 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 D." At the critical moment of life and death, Enel also had the determination to cut off his arm. He directly grasped Zwakong's scalpel with one hand, but unfortunately the scalpel covered with haki also directly cut off Enel's 4 fingers. You'd better shut up obediently. Bah. Zwakong floated in the air on moonwalk and said with a faint mockery, "Kill you." Enel roared. Crackle, crackle. Thunder surged on Enel's body. Enel hit the 2 small drums behind him fiercely and roared to the sky. 30 million volts, Thunderbird. Advertisement number, 30 million volts, Thunderbeast. A phoenix-like bird sprang out of one of the thunder drums, and a wolf-like thunderwolf sprang out of the other thunder drum. 10 beasts, one above and one below, roared at a speed beyond the human eye. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Both the air and the sea of clouds were evaporated by the scorching thunder, and thick water vapor rose up, blocking everyone's sight. Let me try the power of thunder and lightning. Zwakong looked at this powerful attack and not only did not dodge, but excitedly greeted it, muttering, "Iron body 500,000 tons." The blood in Zwakong's body flowed rapidly, forming a strange shape. The muscles all over his body solidified into a shape like iron. At the same time, Zwakong's body suddenly sank, and the black haki had covered his body. The spectators were all eager to see what happened to Zwakong. No one knew what happened to him after resisting such an attack head-on. Ahem, Zwakong walked out of the smoke, coughing up a few strands of blood from the corner of his mouth. The clothes on his upper body were completely torn, but surprisingly, the perfect upper body was intact. How is this possible? Enel said in astonishment. How is this possible? You are just a frog in the well. Zwakong laughed disdainfully. Room gravity space. Zwakong suddenly disappeared again. Enel, who had learned a lesson, was just about to escape immediately in elemental form, but suddenly found that his body seemed to be oppressed by a very heavy load and could not move safely. What the hell is going on? Enel cursed in his heart. Die. Zwakong appeared in front of Enel and laughed cruelly. Room explosion, gravity scalpel. The ethereal and even more bizarre purple scalpel appeared. Zwakong waved his hand and immediately glanced at Enel's position. Enel's heart network clearly felt the attack coming, but he was pressed by gravity and couldn't escape for a while. Advertisement, you actually defied the will of God. Die. 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 Enel roared in a completely ferocious voice. 60 million volts, Thunder Dragon. After beating 2 thunder drums in a row, Enel's body suddenly burst into more violent lightning, and the terrifying Thunder Dragon appeared and hovered around Ailu. Not enough. Not enough. This is far from enough. Swallow it for me. Swallow it. Swallow more lightning. Enel pressed his hands on the Thunder Dragon and roared. Crackle. The thunder was injected into the Thunder Dragon's body, and the Thunder Dragon became more condensed and more ferocious, roaring crazily. The lightning slowly formed a black shape and rushed out in Enel's completely crazy eyes. So that's it. When Logia's power is raised to ultimate, even haki can attack the space of Op Fruit. The Thunder Dragon broke through Zwakong's gravity scalpel with great force and rushed towards himself, but held his chin and sighed. Room. At the moment when the Thunder Dragon was approaching, Zwakong disappeared without a trace. The Thunder Dragon lost its target, and the lightning rushed into the sea of clouds and disappeared. Zit! A violent explosion suddenly rose into the sky, and huge waves were hundreds of meters high. A huge deep pit formed on the sea surface, which affected Monet and others. 1313. Enel also coughed up blood, his whole body trembling slightly. He was no match for the future Thor Enel. Such an attack consumed too much energy. The game is almost over here. It's time to send you to death. I will take your Thunder Fruit. Zwakong appeared out of thin air and said calmly. DA. Unspecified currency, eh? Enel laughed. The humble blue sea people are really thinking about the power of God. Don't think that you can defeat God like this. The power of God is not comparable to that of a mere mortal. Shut up, Zwakong said coldly. The figure suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Enel again and punched. Search. Enel's figure disappeared strangely, and thunder surged not far away. Enel appeared again and laughed. Thunder substitute. How can God be unprepared?
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.